Is someone with Abby?
Coach. He's my coach.
You're one of the coaches, though. Could you want to come up and explain to us what
Yes.
she actually accomplished? I think she's being modest.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, you're a junior, right?
Yeah.
You're running again next year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, thank you.
A friend of mine who loves track and field says, even though you're a Dublin representative, everybody wants to stay, regardless of where they come from, and watch you run.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Well, it is, we are very, very proud to have you here, and thank you for coming in. We have a proclamation for you, Abby. Whereas Dublin Kaufman High School student Abby Steiner won her third consecutive title in the 200-meter, defended her title in the 100-meter, and finished first in the anchor leg of the 800-meter relay of the OHSAA Division I State Track and Field Championship meet on June the 3rd of this year. And whereas in addition to winning her third consecutive title, she set a new state and meet record in the 200-meter at 23.56 seconds. And whereas her victory in the 100-meter set a new state and meter record in the preliminaries with a time of 11.54 seconds. And whereas in the 800-meter relay with teammates Isabella Angerman, Simone Rivard-Roberts, Wambu, help me, Coach. There you go. Abby ran the anchor leg and rallied her team to a victory in a come-from-behind finish. And whereas these victories at Division I state championships gave her 5 individual outdoor state championships and 2 relay wins in the 800-meter relay, in addition to the 5 indoor state titles she holds in the 60-meter and 200-meter. And whereas her impressive achievements have placed her among the most decorated athletes from Central Ohio in the history of the sport. Now therefore I, Gregory S. Peterson, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of all of Dublin City Council, do hereby declare Friday, June 16th, 2017 as Abby Steiner Day. And I have a proclamation for you here, Abby. Congratulations to you and your family. We're very proud to have you here in Dublin.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, don't go far, Abby. I don't know if we've ever given 2 proclamations to the same person. Have we ever done that before? You have multiple victories at one time, so we might as well do multiple proclamations. Coach, you want to bring the rest of your team up? So maybe you could tell us what you guys accomplished as a team.
The girls placed 3rd as overall team for the 3rd straight year as the state meet.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what are the other young ladies' names?
This is Louie and this is Simone.
Great, welcome.
And Isabel is currently in Ireland, so
Oh,
from Dublin.
okay. She must not have read the meeting notice correctly. So we also have a proclamation for you, Coach, and for your ladies. Whereas Maddie Stepanak,
Yes.
an American poet, peacemaker, and philosopher, said, "Unity is strength, and whereas teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved." This quote describes the teamwork and collaboration of the Dublin Kaufman girls 800 relay team. And whereas Isabella, Simone, Abby, and Wambui displayed great teamwork and perseverance in their quest for the state championship in the 800 relay event at the OHSAA Division I Track and Field meet on June 3rd of this year. And whereas their trust and support of each other exemplifies the true meaning of teamwork and character. And whereas in the 800-meter relay, under the guidance of Coach Greg King, head girls track coach of Dublin Kaufman High School, and Coach Darren, how do you say your last name? Obrimba. Sprint and hurdle coach, these athletes showed determination and endurance to rally to victory. And whereas their family, school, and community are very proud of these accomplishments, now therefore I, Gregory S. Peterson, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of all of Dublin City Council, do hereby congratulate these young ladies for their state championship in the 800 relay event. Signed this 12th day of June 2017. So this from behind thing, does anybody have a play-by-play? You can tell us what exactly that means.
Well, they've kind of done it 2 years in a row.
Wow.
I think last year they were behind by maybe 20 or 30 meters. This year I was probably only like 20 or 15 meters behind.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
And you caught up and won it all. So do you two ladies want to say, does anyone want to say anything? We're very proud to have you here.
I think they'd rather be running.
I think they're going to run out, they're going to run out of the room. Well, great, congratulations, and thank you very much. Mark Tamihata from the Transportation Research Center is here this evening. Mark, do you want to step forward? Thank you so much for coming. I know that a number of council people have been out to your facility some time ago, and Mark Tommy was nice enough to host me there last week to their facility. If you have not had an opportunity to go out there, this facility and what they do there is one of the most impressive things that I have had the fortune to be given a behind-the-scenes tour of. And Mark Tommy and his fellow executives are absolute stellar, top-shelf people that are incredibly impressive in person and in their experiences and what they do every day. So we greatly appreciate you coming in with all the corridor things that are going on between here in Marysville and the TRC. We just wanted you to come in and sort of tell us what it is that you do and expose everybody to this wonderful facility that you guys have.
Great. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, everyone, for having me here tonight. I'm going to start with a short video to describe what TRC is, and I'd like to share a little bit more about what we're doing heading toward the future.
When Ohio native Neil Armstrong became the first human to walk on the moon in 1969, he set a path of victory for both his country and the rest of the world. Around that same time, the state of Ohio and the Ohio State University's renowned College of Engineering were planning the Transportation Research Center, a world-class facility designed to promote economic development and advance transportation-related academics and research. Fast forward to today. TRC, as it's known, is strategically located near the geographic center of North America's ever-expanding automotive manufacturing operations, on over 4,500 acres of rolling terrain in East Liberty, Ohio, about 35 miles northwest of Columbus.
TRC is big, both in terms of size and capability. Here we are on the 7.5-mile high-speed track. We're the largest independent vehicle test facility and proving ground in North America. We run 24/7, 359 days a year, in rain, sleet, snow, and ice, performing virtually every kind of testing: durability, reliability, safety, crash avoidance, crash protection, brake, fuel economy, emissions, dynamic, on every kind of vehicle: cars, trucks, motorcycles, ATVs, garbage trucks, fire engines, military vehicles, on any kind of surface: gravel, dirt, sand, mud, concrete, and asphalt.
Every day, our professionals meet the unique and diverse needs of more than 1,000 clients in an environment that provides total confidentiality and safety, with strict protocols in place for top-level security. Our comprehensive facilities enable the research, validation, and testing of new technologies, products, and systems, such as automated vehicles, many years before these innovations and ideas become reality. Our people also provide customer support for project management, engineering, consultation, and R&D, as well as test drivers, equipment rental and calibration, and numerous other services. And our elite driving school teaches highly specialized behind-the-wheel skills our clients' engineers and support staffs need to develop better, safer products and enhance their own vehicle testing operations. A great way to judge our competencies is to look at who uses us on a regular basis. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, has its only federal vehicle research and test laboratory right here at TRC. And our engineers and support staffs work with the U.S. Department of Transportation to develop and validate motor vehicle standards. That means TRC actually tests the tests before they become standards. Our relationships with NHTSA, OSU, and other alliances ensure that our clients receive the most current information, cutting-edge research, and effective testing and validation methods to meet their needs, now and for the future. Located on one of the nation's first intelligent corridors along Route 33 between Columbus and East Liberty, TRC plays an integral role in the U.S. DOT's Smart Columbus Mobility Project, shaping how people and goods will be transported in coming decades. And with the expansion of our facilities and capabilities, we will remain at the forefront of the development, testing, and validation of quickly evolving technologies, and continue to provide our clients the one-stop turnkey services they need. It's a long way from the 1960s, when Neil Armstrong explored what was thought to be the limits of mankind, breaking barriers unimaginable to most. This innovative spirit of adventure and ongoing pursuit of new challenges continues today at Transportation Research Center. Better vehicles, better drivers, better roads. For more information, please visit trcpg.com.
So I consider myself, and I think the 450 or so colleagues that work with me at TRC, we can consider ourselves some of the most fortunate people around. You know, if you like cars, you like things, it's a great place to be. And what we find a lot of people say is, we had no idea TRC existed. And we don't want this to be a secret anymore. As you saw, TRC is the largest independent vehicle test facility of its kind in North America. But with the changing regulations, the shift to autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles, the investment required, the work required, the know-how required is immense. And we can only get there by working together. Now, East Liberty may seem sort of way out there. It's only 35 miles. And, you know, we were and still are the largest independent facility of its kind in North America, but the world is getting smaller. And there are companies all around the world that need help, facilities, know-how like this. And our goal is to be the choice for manufacturers around the world. So I want to talk a little bit about you know, how we came about. In the 60s, Governor Rhodes had this vision. We want to create the most awesome vehicle test facility in North America, right here in central Ohio. And the state purchased 8,100 acres of land, and on half of that created this facility now known as TRC. And what did that experiment do? It landed Honda, the first non-North American to set up product development, research, and engineering here in central Ohio. And along with Honda came suppliers and others, and a growing business that's sustaining over 1,000 customers around the world testing right here, including the U.S. government, setting regulations and so forth. And we're a part of the Ohio State University. You see on the bottom row our board of directors, the Dean of the College of Engineering, Chief Financial Officer of Ohio State University, Senior Vice President of Research. We have the CEO of Columbus 2020, the local economic development organization, on our board. And the mission is to grow TRC to make sure that it can serve the needs of the industry, not just in Ohio, not just around the country, but around the world. The leadership team we've assembled, all but one are new in the last 2.5 years, with experience in the auto industry coming from all over. In fact, most of the people don't have a 5-minute commute to TRC. I live in Dublin, a new transplant here, and I love it. Our Chief Operating Officer lives in Circleville in Pickaway County, a mere 2-hour drive to work every day. On the far left-hand side, our Chief Human Resources Officer drives from Springfield to TRC. Our Chief Financial Officer drives from Toledo. Our Labs VP lives in Bellefontaine, sort of a local guy. And our Chief Marketing Officer lives in German Village downtown. And our head of the Proving Ground lives in Delaware. So our goal is to be the employer of choice for people that have a passion like this to come. This summer we have 22 summer interns. Our goal is to not help develop great products, but to be a breeding ground of talent. Engineering, science, technology, engineering, business, marketing, driving skills, business, communications. And that's what we have. But we recognize we can't do it all on our own. We have a desire to grow. Our 5-year plan is to double in size. In our first year in 5 years, we grew 19%. We're focusing on energizing the team, making sure everyone's excited about being there, making sure our customers are wowed and delighted and want to come back and tell their colleagues about it, and to collaborate with others, and to build our capabilities. So in terms of, sorry. I thought I was switching. Nancy, could you flip the slide? Sorry. Go to the next one. Thank you. So customers. Customers, this is just an example, not all are current customers, some are past customers, some we're recording. But you recognize there, it's not your typical just large auto manufacturers. They're component suppliers, specialty equipment manufacturers, some from the local Ohio region, some from North America, and some that maybe you've never heard of from around the world. There's one in particular on there that is a Chinese. When I was starting my career in the auto industry 32 years ago, China did not have an automotive market for retail. The U.S. auto market had its record year last year, 17 million units of sales. Guess how many cars were sold in China last year? 1 million, 7 million, 17 million, 23 million. China is now the largest manufacturer, larger than 2, 3, and 4 combined. And they don't sell a product in the U.S. And think about what happened in the 60s. The Japanese started selling. Then the Koreans started selling. The next frontier is the Chinese. And they're looking where they're going to set up shop. And so 2 months ago, we were in China and met many. One of them said, we actually have a mission. We've actually got 6 target cities to set up a representative office. Columbus was not one of them. We didn't know you existed, but we happen to be the only U.S. vehicle test organization presenting in Shanghai at the world's largest auto show. And they said, we're going to visit Columbus. We'll add you as a distant 7th to our consideration set. And they came, Columbus 2020, the city of Dublin. We all put on a show, not a show. We showed what we have. They narrowed the field from 7 to 3, and Columbus is in the running, and they're going to be coming back. So our goal is to be the place of choice for people to come, initially set up a representative office, but then set up manufacturing and R&D to create jobs, opportunities, economic growth for all. If we can turn to the next slide, Nancy. We know we can't do it alone. And this slide, they're icons for organizations and entities that we've been collaborating with. 2 years ago, we had 4 icons on the slide. Now we're over 40, and we just added, with the mayor's permission last week, the city of Dublin. We know we can't do it alone. TRC isn't that far away, as some of our employees have shown, and all our customers show. So our goal is to be a magnet to the central Ohio for the U.S. auto industry. If we go to the next slide, what really excites me is what we're doing to invest in the future. This year, we've announced $201 million of additional investment to grow the capability to attract more business. And I won't go through all the details, but I will talk about the second one, which isn't the largest number on the page, but pretty significant. Smart Center Phase 1. If you go to the next slide, please, Nancy. So SMART stands for Smart Mobility Advanced Research and Test Center. And if we look at the ecosystem, you saw that picture on the video. We have Columbus. Many of you may not know, the U.S. Department of Transportation had this Smart City Challenge. 87 cities around the country applied to be the nation's smart city, to prove out technologies and solutions for movement of people and goods safely. How do people that don't have access to transportation, due to economic concerns, disability, age, whatever the reason, how do we enable people to be able to move safely? It's not just safe self-driving cars, but that's one of those. Columbus won. And with that came $40 million. And with that $40 million came another 417 minus 4, $377 million of additional matching investment to the city of Columbus to invest in the technology of the future. So 4 zones in Columbus have been selected for retail, residential, commercial, and logistics to prove out those technologies. And that will be replicated elsewhere in the city, elsewhere in other cities in the states, around the country, and around the world. Columbus is a test bed for all these technologies. And then connecting Dublin, the outskirts of Columbus, and East Liberty along the 33 corridor is the state's first smart corridor. Fiber is being laid right now to have self-driving vehicles drive on public roads mixed with traditional vehicles. And many people say, boy, that's scary, or that's exciting. Enter TRC. So TRC's goal is to be able to prove out those technologies and solutions safely in a controlled environment, off public roads, where experimentation can be done safely, and then deploy those solutions to public roads. So our Smart Center phase one out of 3, is the first step in accomplishing that. And if we can turn to the next slide. The other piece is with these self-driving vehicles, the driver is not the person behind the wheel, it's the vehicle. And one of the things that we've been doing for many years is training our drivers, our engineers, our test drivers, our customers to be better drivers. And we have companies around the world that are sending people to Ohio to get trained, or hiring our people to go elsewhere to train them. And the next frontier is how do we work with the manufacturers and the algorithms and the sensors to enable drivers to be, vehicles to be safer drivers of themselves. So exciting times. We don't have all the solutions. You may have read in the newspaper last week, we just signed an agreement with Wind River, an Intel company, to, again, advance the state-of-the-art, advance the technology, right based here in Ohio, to enable the deployment of these technologies safely, to develop them first, then deploy them. The last slide talks about our phase 2 and phase 3, which we're seeking funding, but I probably talked more than you asked for, so I want to stop here and just, one, thank you for your time, and offer the opportunity to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming in. Questions from council?
I have a question for you. Did you get to go out with Mark Tommy and do donuts?
I did, well, this is what Mark Tommy did to me. Were we in that white car that was in the video? We're in this car, and he hands me a helmet. I rent a car. He hands me a helmet, and he says, do you want what were my choices of the type of drive? It was either feisty or
Frisky.
Frisky. He said, do you want calm or do you want frisky? And of course I said, let's go with frisky. And he is, in addition to being incredibly impressive as an executive, he's a pretty fair driver as well. And then he said, we're going to get these tires to spin and slide, and we went through this water thing, and it was, but you know, the thing that, and ironically, my daughter had her first in-car training the day before I went out there. And as scary as that is, he was never at any point not in complete control of that vehicle, no matter what happened. And that is what is so exciting about what you guys are willing to do and your partnerships and all that, not just the economic development and what you attract to this region, and Dublin being situated pretty well geographically to help support those kinds of businesses, but the resources and the things that you can offer and services in our community are just phenomenal. I think if parents were given the opportunity to have their kids learn some of those skills that you guys could teach them, it is something that this town would embrace and really take advantage of. So I really, really appreciate the time that you spent with me, having me out there and showing me the facility that you had. And I, even more than that, am excited about the future and partnering and you guys bringing your expertise to this area and to our community as well. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you. We hope to really touch the community and everyone in our community in some way, whether it's developing products, develop solutions for the roadways to keep our roadways safe, help develop exciting products, or just keep people safe in terms of driving skills on the highway. Our driving programs were developed to train our own drivers. We have a fairly extensive teen program. And up till now, it's been pretty local in the local Marysville, East Liberty area. And anyone with kids or spouses or other members of the family, you want to make sure they're safe. If there's anything we can do, we certainly love to do that.
Fantastic. Any other questions?
You know, just one thing that impressed me was when we were up there, when you would think the Europeans, of course, they have their own training tracks, and it was interesting to find out that a lot of these really great cars are shipped here to be tested in Central Ohio. So you guys got a great reputation.
Thank you. So one of the things we did, and this is credit to the governor 40 years ago, is we have space. And, you know, not everywhere in the world is land quite so affordable. And we're not landlocked because we have plenty of space to build within. And in fact, the Smart Center that I mentioned earlier will be the largest independent advanced technology center at 540 acres contained within existing proving ground. And there are facilities like that popping up around the world and around the country, and we're collaborating with just about every one of them. What they don't have is the size and the scope. And, all our customers are trying to develop more product faster, cheaper, more efficiently. And to be able to do everything in one place and have the power of research and engineering institutions like the Ohio State University and others around, is a real gift. I feel really fortunate to have had the opportunity to move to Dublin. And, again, I want to thank you all on behalf of the 450 employees at TRC for the opportunity to speak tonight, share with you what we have to do. Hopefully, some of the people might be interested in either working or collaborating. We'd love to get to know everyone so that we can work together to advance this ball down the court.
Greg brought up an interesting point after he was up visiting with you, and that was somehow doing a collaboration with you where our students who are learning how to drive could learn a higher level of driving and awareness. And I don't know if you guys have developed a program like that or not yet, or?
We have programs, but we don't have things local here, and we'd like to work together with really any area that has a sizable footprint, a parking lot. We set remote programs around the country. Shame on us for not doing it here in Dublin before, but, this is the beginning.
And I had a conversation after I was out there with Dr. Hoadley on this front, and he was very, very excited about the possibilities, and we're going to take him out there and hopefully advance that cooperation as well. Really exciting stuff. And we're very proud that you live here in Dublin.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to the international headquarters of the Chinese corporation here in Dublin, so if we could arrange that, it'd be lovely.
Working on that next. Great. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Moving along. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone that, oh wait, on citizen comments, I don't have anyone that signed in. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment about anything that does not appear on our agenda and you just didn't sign in? Come on up.
There's the lady.
Hi, good
Hi,
evening.
welcome. Just your name and address, please.
Sure, it's Laura Sale, and I live at 9968 Glasgow Court.
Do you know you had 3 people follow you when you came up
I
here?
do, and I'm glad my son came up because he was
Okay.
a little bit nervous in
Don't be
doing
nervous.
so. So first of all, I just want to thank you for your service. I'm a resident of Dublin, work within Dublin, and have 2 fine children that are recipients of the education here in Dublin. And the reason we're here is the bike path that connects Muirfield Road to Concord, which leads up to Eli Penny. My understanding is this is a topic that's been debated and brought up for years and precedes myself, which is why we have a constituency here today. But I just wanted to convey my own concerns from a safety perspective. I did attend, along with Michelle Brenner, who is also a resident of Dublin, the Concord Township meeting on May 24th, and just had a very open discussion with them about what we can do in partnership to try and figure out a solution. You will say we don't have a solution, but we want to be active participants to find a solution. Gavin, if you're not comfortable.
He's not going to say a word.
But I will say, just on behalf of my 2 children, my older one is at Jerome, and when he spoke to Concord, he tries to bike on the road, and he literally cringes and closes his eyes to go over that hill, which to me as a parent is unacceptable. And for the younger children, many of them are cutting through private property, which isn't a good solution either. So I'll turn it over to Leslie Ungerat to give more of a background, but we really are here to partner with you and ask you for your commitment to find a solution with us.
Leslie Ungerat, I'm at 5519 Haddington in Muirfield. I have students at Grizel and 2 students now at Penny. And I just have done some digging, and I've kind of picked up the ball where other moms and dads have tried to keep it rolling, so here I am. And I just it's just another safety thing, and I noticed May is Bicycle Safety Month in Dublin, and Dublin did an awesome job of promoting it, and it was everywhere, the Twitter contest or whatever that was running. So I'm an avid outdoors person. I always encourage my children to be active versus non-active, and I think the ability to ride your bike to school should be for every student in Dublin. So the fact that there's 1,700 feet of bicycle path that's missing in between connecting kids from Muirfield up to Penny, and then also connecting students to Griselle and Jerome. They don't have the ability to bike safely to school. So we're just here to try to offer our assistance, our help, and whatever we can do just as citizens to get the path built. So that's it for me.
If I may add, in our discussion with Bart Johnson, who's the Concord Township trustee, he's committed to working with whomever and us to helping come up with a solution. So you have our commitment on behalf of private citizens. We have been told by Mr. Johnson that we have his board's commitment, and we're here asking for your commitment to at least sit down with us and try and figure out what have been the obstacles and what do we need to do to work together to overcome those.
You know, this council's been very actively involved in this, as our staff has as well. A lot of this is out of our control, and your fight is over in Concord Township, in my view. We've spent money, time, energy. We've spent money, $200,000 or $300,000 on engineering plans, I think, that were pitched because it was the wrong side of the road. And we don't have the jurisdiction to take property in Concord Township, and that's the rub. This council, this staff is all committed to getting a solution, but your fight is down there in Concord.
Okay, and so, and I appreciate hearing that, and Bart did share that some of the engineering plans, there was perhaps not an agreement around that. We're here to push nicely for a solution.
Well, their agreement, I think the disconnect is they do not want to take property for the path. Now, those are tough things. Nobody on this council likes eminent domain, but there are times we have to do that. We have an incredible bike path system in this city, and we're committed to that. We run in time and time again to cost overruns because of property owners that aren't willing to either donate or even work with us. I think the Glick Road path's been held up for how many years, Dana? A long time.
I would just add that, you know, we are very committed to the notion of this bike path. We are under design. We do have funding to build our portion of the path. I'm looking at Megan O'Callahan, our Director of Public Works. Megan has spent a lot of time engaged with Concord Township on this issue, leading design efforts. We did expend funding for design, and then with the request to change the design, which we've been responding to that. We are trying to work together, and we will continue to work together to try to figure out a solution. There are some challenges, as Councilmember Keenan points out. We'll try to do our best to work through those, understand the safety concern and the need. I can assure you the City of Dublin will address its portion of that path very quickly as we are funded to do that. But we will work with Concord Township to identify other options and solutions on their side of it, and see what kind of cooperation we can find. I can tell you, I personally, as did Director O'Callahan, met with officials in Delaware County to try to ask for funding and a prioritization of this. So we have been out there lobbying as well, other levels of government to try to come forward with this as well. So there's any number of other things we can try to do, some of which we're talking through and we have to present to council at some point. So.
Well, and if it is truly a funding issue, which is my understanding from the discussions, I know there have been, that there have been engineering concerns, but if we can come together and come to an agreement around that, as citizens, we are willing to fund locally and privately because we feel it's that important. And so we are really here coming today just to really understand what are the true obstacles so that we can work alongside you and just get it
Right.
done.
And I know that we've published some comments quite a bit. I think Megan did a nice job of laying out a very historical account of all the different efforts and obstacles and challenges related to this. So it's out there in writing. I know we circulated it on social media and directly by email to folks. We'll continue to get that out there. And then just because we cite those doesn't mean that they can't be overcome. So don't think that we're not trying to work on those. But it's important, as you point out, that everyone understand what some of those are. We are limited in some of our legal ability, authorities, and so forth. But we'll try to continue to work through those as quickly as we
So
can.
let's make sure we get your contact information, because I think it would be helpful for you to just read through what Megan put together. I have a child at Penny as well, so I totally feel for your, oh, she's got
And
it.
so I think when I say knowing what the obstacles are, I know there are plenty, and we're aware of maybe not all of them, but most of them. I guess what we're here looking for is your commitment to allow us to help move this along. And I know that it's not to say that there haven't been past efforts and valiant efforts to do so, but at the end of the day, it's still not moving forward. And so we're trying to figure out what is that extra bit that is going to move this over the finish line.
Well, we would welcome the opportunity to host a meeting with ourselves, Concord Township, and you in a single room. I know that there's been lots of communicating in circular patterns, and everyone's talking to each other, but maybe not necessarily in the same room. Probably where we'll get is identifying the same situation, but we got to work through solutions.
Dana, given our history with easement acquisitions and, the occasional taking of easements, Concord Township probably doesn't have the level of experience that we have with that. Is there a way that we can help assist them with some of those processes that might forward the ball? I know, from a personal standpoint, Gavin was going to come over and walk the tournament with Tucker for a day, right? And I said, well, where does Gavin live? Well, he lives in Muirfield. I said, well, just tell him to ride his bike over, because transportation can be pretty difficult via car. And, it was apparent that, he can't get to the rest of his community because the connectivity isn't there. So if we could help, if one of the biggest obstacles is the legal acquisition of right-of-ways and so forth, it would be very helpful, I think, if we at least lend them some of our expertise historically of what we've done.
That's where I was looking from, because we have not explored talking with county yet. Is this a school board issue? Because it is a school safety issue, because we are trying to get students to and from school. It's not.
No.
So I didn't know if there's any other entities that we need to evolve. Is there grant writing that citizens need to do at the state level? We're just
Yes.
willing to hop in to help with that.
We'll let
Yeah.
Megan maybe address some of these things.
We have offered assistance in all forms, such as acquisition, design, applying for grants, things like that. The issue with the acquisition with the township trustees is it's my understanding per Bart Johnson that it's just their policy not to go there. So it's their policy that they will not take land for these types of projects, because from his perspective, that's why people live in the township, is they don't want to deal with these types of matters. So they don't want to be in that position.
So
Now,
it's
one
really,
thing-
it's
one
really a
thing-
deal with the property owners that abut that pathway. If you get those people to
Yeah.
agree, you probably have an easier row to hoe.
Yeah, so there's one property just north of Dublin's corporation limit on the east side that it's my understanding that that's what prompted the trustees to want to move the path to the other side. One of the questions I had is how recently have they had discussions with that property owner? And I don't think it's been in the past few years, so I think that's one thing there might want to be some
Yeah, not from my
discussion about.
understanding. I think it's been some time since they've had a
Yeah.
discussion. And I don't know if it would help from, a personal level to potentially approach that homeowner to say, hey, we're, your community, we're part of this community too. I mean, I don't know.
Do we have a list of parcels that are required to
Yeah.
make
We can
it?
get
we
that
do.
list. Yeah, either side of the road, there's going to be acquisition necessary. It's just my understanding from Bart that they knew specifically that that one property owner was not going to be.
And perhaps these folks can work with their neighbors. If we
And
knew
that's
those property owners, maybe they could engage their neighbors in that conversation and might be able to forward that ball.
Yeah, I think that this really is going to be a bit of a grassroots type of an effort. because there are multiple issues, but to sort of boil them down to, part of what Megan is saying is, there's the desire to want to do the take, right? And the township does not have that desire. We can't force them to. There's certainly a financial issue. And even if you were to, let's say, crowdsource and get the money, that would be great. So there's a couple of different things that are part of the problem. And of course, again, we don't have jurisdiction, so we are reliant upon Concord Township to help us tote that line.
Yeah, we don't have the expertise in this area to get it done, but we definitely have the willpower, and we have connections to make it happen.
Well, the gal behind you does, and I think she stands ready and willing to help.
Exactly.
And I think that it's a problem that can be solved. And I know Megan would be fully committed to providing you with any information and resources that you would need to, continue the dialogue and the process.
Yeah, I want to thank you for picking up the torch on this, because you're in my ward, and I've been involved in this from the get-go, and I know the city of Dublin stands completely behind the limit of what we're allowed to do within our property. And we're going to build the bicycle trail to that point. But this reminds me of the time when we had the problem with Shawnee Hills at 745 and the Glick Road intersection, where we had cars backing up 200 yards trying to get through really a substandard intersection. And finally, it was a meeting with, and this involves Concord Township. I mean, you guys elect those people, they got to be responsible to you. And from what I can see, it's not happening on their side. Our watch, we're ready to pay the money, expand the effort, do everything we can to help out and go overboard in the design and everything else to make this happen for you. But it's just not happening on the other side of the border, and we don't have that jurisdiction. I mean, we just aren't legally allowed to go into their territory and do all this. So, but I tell you what, we finally went over there and they said, we don't have the money to do this. They finally admitted it. We just don't have the money to fix the intersection. We asked them, if they could raise the money, and finally got down to, can you get a loan, a grant? They didn't want a loan because they didn't want to burden their taxpayers, but finally got down to, and we'll write the grant for you if we have to, because the city's very competent, Dublin is. And they actually ended up writing their own grant and got $500,000, and that's how that intersection finally got resolved. So you almost got to go there and sit down with them and say, hey, this is really important to us and the safety of our children, and get this thing finished.
So we've got a large group that has a lot of fortitude, so.
Yep, and that's a great point. And to circle back around to what Dana said, I think we need to get the group together with Concord Township in a room. I'd be happy to participate because, like I said, I got a kiddo up there at Penny myself. So Dana and Megan, let's just circle back around and make sure that happens. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming.
Okay.
Well, I
you got a
guess I
plan?
want to make sure that I've got direction of council here relative to engaging on this. So we have been engaging with Concord Township. We've very aggressively. We've done the design. We've done the design twice. We've lobbied Delaware County. Megan stays in contact with Mr. Johnson on a continuous basis. So I just want to make sure that it's the majority of council here who says, circle the wagons together with all jurisdictions. And I'm always happy. I just hosted a meeting of cities today to talk about a number of things with public health. I'm always happy to do that. So we can, is that the
You want a
pleasure of
motion?
all the
I
council?
can make a
I don't really need, I think a head nod is fine.
Yeah.
I just want to
No,
make
I
sure
think
everyone's on
it's
the
really
same sheet of
important,
music.
Megan.
And so, okay, so we'll do that. We'll continue to be innovative and out of the box to try to figure out if there's a way to fund this. So we appreciate everyone's help with that. So we'll be
Yeah,
back.
I just want to be clear. I want, first of all, I mean, I read the very detailed memo or, summary or whatever it was of all the efforts up to this point. And my takeaway from that was that we had done everything within our power and jurisdiction, with respect to this issue. I mean, they're just inherent limitations. I mean, we can't annex Concord Township. I think Councilmember Keenan, did a good job of summarizing what the limitations are. Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that we're building a bike path, right? Okay, I mean, right, I mean, and that's the limit of what we can do, right? I mean, that's not to say that
The only other thing we can do is help lend our expertise.
facilitation, absolutely, yeah.
And that's all I'm asking you to do, is lend our expertise to help them do the acquisition portion that they need. The funding,
And I just want to be clear, we have been doing that.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not the issue. The issue is their policy. So you have to change their policy with respect to acquisition to make any headway on that. That's my view.
Right.
unless you're able to get a cooperative and you don't need to do a taking, if there was enough pressure put on by the neighbors to say, hey, listen, neighbor, we would like you to participate. And I think that's the direction that I'm given.
And I think that what they're asking for is some help to figure out how to do that piece of it, which I think we can absolutely help with.
Well, there's 3 township trustees up there, right?
There are 3.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't do this without you, so.
Yeah, you need 2 votes
Count to 2.
of those 3 people.
Okay, we have a plan?
All right.
All right, great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming in. On to the consent agenda. Is there any council member that would like to remove any of the 7 items from the consent agenda?
There is a resolution 46-17 that I think, in my mind, warrants a bit of discussion.
Okay, we will remove Resolution 46-17 and visit it at the regular portion of the agenda. I would make a motion that we pass the remaining 6 items that are on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second?
Ann?
Ms. Zale?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Groom?
Yes.
Second readings, ordinance 34-17, Ann?
Adopting the proposed tax budget for fiscal year 2018.
David? Thank you.
As outlined in your staff memo, the tax budget is required to be filed by July 15th with both Franklin and Delaware counties. This is really a preliminary document that we file with the counties based on some basic assumptions. As we head into the operating budget at the end of the year, we'll have more detailed analysis.
Any questions from council? Hearing none. Ann?
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Zale?
Yes.
Ordinance 35-17, Ann?
Prohibiting medical marijuana cultivation, processing, and retail distribution within the city of Dublin.
Jen?
Good evening, council members. Tonight, we're presenting at second reading the legislation, the code amendment that's before you. For some reason, let me advance. Technical difficulties. The code amendment is to prohibit the cultivation, processing, and distribution of medical marijuana. Just as a bit of history, this was approved by the General Assembly. It's House Bill 523 in 2016. Governor Kasich signed the bill into law on September 9, 2016, but there's an extensive rulemaking process that's being followed, and we've been monitoring since the beginning. The final rules for implementation must be completed by September 8, 2017, and the program must be operational before September 8, 2018. Now, pursuant to the city's home rule authority, we have the power to enact planning, zoning, and business regulations that further the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. House Bill 523 also explicitly contains a provision that allows municipalities to adopt restrictions, including prohibiting or limiting the number of cultivators, processors, or retail dispensaries within the city limits. The Law Director's Office has analyzed the options available to it. Again, we've been monitoring the guidelines and the rulemaking process extensively. We've been consulting with the police department all along the way. And while House Bill 523 allows the state of Ohio to regulate medical marijuana and to permit that, medical marijuana continues to be classified as a Schedule I controlled substance under the Federal Controlled Substance Act and is illegal under federal law. So that carries a number of consequences. It requires, because of restrictions with banking, there's the need for medical businesses, marijuana businesses to be cash-based. The presence of raw plant materials in cultivation and processing also raises concerns for safety in those facilities. With these considerations in mind, we're sensitive to the concern that medical marijuana has been used by patients and some believe as an effective method of treatment. And I just want to reiterate that this legislation will in no way impact the use or physician recommendation to use medical marijuana in the city of Dublin. The Code Amendment adds Chapter 121, which is a business regulation, which prohibits, again, cultivation, processing, and retail dispensing, and then prohibits those uses in all zoning districts. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the proposed zoning code amendment at their May 4th meeting and recommended approval. So based on the negative implications associated with the federal prohibition, we're recommending that City Council approve the proposed legislation, which again prohibits cultivation, processing, and retail distribution of medical marijuana. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council? None? Hearing none?
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Ms. Salee? Yes. Mr. Keenan? Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Ordinance 36-17.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Brian K. Dorner, MD, Inc., to induce it to purchase a new facility to retain and expand an office and its associated operations and workforce all within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Colleen?
Good evening. We have been working with Dorner Plastic Surgery about relocation and expansion. They currently have 13 employees and are looking to add 23 more by the end of 2021. Proposed before you tonight is a 4-year, 12% performance incentive on withholdings that is capped at $21,800, and that is tied to Dorner Plastic Surgery acquiring a new, larger facility within the city of Dublin. So I can answer any questions with that, but I also want to introduce Pat Johnson, who is here tonight. She is the practice manager with Dorner Plastic Surgery, and she can also answer any questions that you might have.
Good evening, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Anything
me.
you want to say?
Just, you know what, we've been looking for a building for about 2 years, and it was between you guys and Powell. And I have to tell you that it was because I met the city manager and Kyle Cridler, that they were so helpful, we decided we definitely want to stay here. So we are really appreciative for what your staff has done for us. And I also wanted to say that Dr. Dorner would have been here himself, but he's out of the country right now. So we're real excited about this opportunity. We're going to expand. We're stepping on each other's toes right now in our current building, and once we expand, we're going to be able to offer things that nobody else in the area can offer. We're going to have an overnight stay for 23-hour overnight stay. Nobody else in the area has that. We're going to have 2 to 3 ORs. We're going to start with 2, but we're going to plumb one out for a 3rd OR. We're just real excited. We love being here. We've been here since 2004, and thank you.
Great,
for
we're very
everything.
proud.
Do you have a facility picked out yet?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, good, great.
We do. Do you want to know what it is?
Not if you can't tell
You're
us.
allowed to
I don't
tell us.
know. Yes, it may be, if it hasn't,
No, I can tell. It's 4930 Bradenton on the corner there. We're expecting to close before the end of the month.
Fantastic.
So
Hopefully in 2
after
weeks.
looking at this group, is there any way you could help us?
Well, I'll talk.
we don't have all night, John.
Yeah.
Come see me. We'll work
Okay.
it out.
John, I got a red pen, I can draw some lines on you later. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
That would be scary.
Okay, any other comments or questions from council to staff or Ms. Johnson? Hearing none. Ann?
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
And Mr. Keenan?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Introduction of first readings, ordinance 38-17, Ann?
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a real estate transfer agreement and an infrastructure agreement wherein the city deeds 3.69 acres, more or less, of real estate to Crawford Hoying Development Partners, LLC, in exchange for the construction of the extension of Bridge Park Avenue from Dale Drive to Village Parkway, authorizing the execution of various related agreements and documents.
Terry? Thanks, Tim.
Good evening. The next two ordinances before you tonight, both 3817 and 17 are interrelated, so I'll be presenting on both of those, both of which we're asking that you have your first reading on this evening. As council is generally aware, we were approached by Crawford Hoying some months back about the prospects of exchanging a series of parcels of land in Dublin in exchange for them undertaking the construction of one of the important roadways within our street network plan. Specifically, the proposal calls for the exchange of two parcels that do have some development capacity, two that are actually primarily the vacation of right-of-way, have very limited development capacity. And the staff has reviewed these items in terms of their value, both from a perspective of what the city paid for them, and in most cases, the payment of these properties was undertaken, the primary properties, as part of eminent domain actions that resulted in a settlement where we had damages to residues and other considerations. But if we use the actual per acre values of what we paid for properties, it's the belief of the administration and legal staff that the value of the road, the cost of the road being built, exceeds the value of those pieces of real estate to us, which quite now are sitting idle. I'll run through very quickly, give you a little more information. As you can see, the Bridge Park Avenue extension that is shown here, about 2,300 feet of extension from its current terminus at Dale Drive, proceeding to the east. This is Shamrock that proceeds as it approaches Village Parkway, so that this segment of roadway is the segment that we are talking about. In this regard, Bridge Park Avenue through this portion of Bridge Park is now complete. And of course, the Shamrock proceeds to this roundabout and traffic gets distributed to Sawmill Road. Sawmill Road, there is a signal at that intersection with Village Parkway as well as at Bridge Park Avenue. The four parcels are also highlighted here. A is a residual of land from a property that the city acquired that initially had this configuration to it. Went through this area here. And we acquired both for the CODA site, which is now developed here. We acquired for the right-of-way extension of the Dale-Toller connector, and we acquired because of the future right-of-way extension through this location. At a similar time frame, the city negotiated with Wendy's International to acquire the acquisition of the needed right-of-way from their western property line all the way through to this general location tying into Shamrock, and the city now owns that as well. City already has ownership to these properties. So all of the right-of-way for the required roadway extension is in place. Site B is the former Wendy's restaurant site, initially close to a 2-acre parcel. We did a total take of that site when we completed the plans for the roundabout, because it was clear that basically the value of the residual, especially for a fast food restaurant, was really being eliminated. Access is highly restricted, and the site is reduced to about half its size, to approximately 1 acre. The two right-of-way residuals, you can see what's identified as C here, which is in front of the shops at River Ridge, where Dale Drive enters. It's kind of an isolated parcel. Crawford Hoying now does own shops at River Ridge. This would only have any kind of development opportunity as part of a larger scale redevelopment plan where maybe something could be done with it, but in the near term, not. Similarly, with parcel D, this was a residual that happened after we teed off the intersection of Toller Ridge with the Dale connector through this location. Again, about 1/3 of an acre. Crawford Owing owns the property in this location here. This is Sycamore Ridge Apartments at this location. Again, no real developability at this point, only as part of a larger assemblage would it have use. So sites A and B are the primary development sites associated with this. Just to share with you the Bridge Street District network as it exists in your codes. This is the section of road that we are talking about, this section of Bridge Park Avenue. As you can see, at the time the code was adopted, Riverside relocation hadn't quite yet occurred. This portion of Bridge Park was under construction or under agreement. This is categorized as a district connector street. It's part of an important series of interior connectors in the Bridge Street District that then collect the traffic from the various smaller minor neighborhood streets. So it is an important connection point, as you can see, with the kind of connectivity from Riverside Drive all the way through to Sawmill, provides additional opportunities for east-west movement, very similar to the recently completed and opened John Shields Parkway, which at this point at least takes you to Village Parkway. So there'd be a lot more opportunities provided from a circulatory perspective, and the street network plan does identify it as an important connector. Just to give you an aerial perspective, I think this is from the Crawford Hoeing office building looking east at Bridge Park Avenue. This is a Dale Drive here. You can see where that extension would proceed to the east. And if you're actually standing behind Wendy's, about the middle of its property in the back, along its northern property line, this is that roadway, the circles around the back, actually the same alignment as where the road will go. Looking in the opposite direction towards the west, you can see Bridge Park development to the west. Generally, we summarized for council previously some of the real estate aspects of this deal. If you were to assign what we actually paid for these properties, which I think is higher, and legal agrees, than what valuations would produce for most of these parcels, you're in at just under $1.5 million. That excludes that small parcel, Shopper River Ridge, which was shot many, many years ago, which quite honestly we view right now has no market value in terms of if it were sold today. Only has value as part of a larger scale redesign and redevelopment of that site. But if you assigned a few $100,000 to that, we still think the spread between the cost of the project at $2.2 million, the value that it provides, and the value of these real estate assets are such that we believe this is a very good approach for the city. The reason you have two ordinances before you is the 39.17 undertakes the required right-of-way vacations that are needed so that those can become available for sale as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. What staff is recommending is that at your second reading on these two ordinances, that council take action to approve ordinances 3817, 3917, authorizing the execution of both the real estate transfer agreement and the infrastructure agreement, which establishes the terms and conditions for the needed extension of Bridge Park Avenue and the necessary transfer of real estate. Under this scenario, in terms of the agreement, the developer would deposit the $2.2 million with the city, which we would release as the project proceeds, and those payments are approved based on construction completion, so that we would effectively be acting similarly when we fund these items. It's just in this case, it's the developer's money that we'd be releasing back based upon construction progress. First reading this evening, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we need to, let's, can we do an introduction on ordinance 39-17 first, and before?
I'll introduce it.
Further?
Sure.
Okay, does council have any questions on 3817 or 3917?
I have a couple questions.
Chris?
So under the financial considerations, it indicates that construction drawings for Bridge Park Avenue extension are complete pending city approval. It further goes on to state that the developer agrees to perform all of the agreed-upon design and construction work. My question is, who designed this I'll call it a temporary road, just for lack of a better term, perhaps. Who designed the temporary road?
EMH&T.
And who designed the permanent road that
EMH&T.
is yet to be constructed?
EMH&T is doing for both, just
Okay.
as we did for the Dale connector.
And so the city paid the bill for the permanent design work of the permanent road?
We've paid nothing on this. All the design work has been funded by the developer at risk.
Of the temporary and the permanent road?
To the extent of the permanent design that we needed to inform the interim phase. In other words, we needed to know the elevations, the stormwater systems, the grade, and those kind of elements, so that we, as we indicated in the memo, minimize what it is that gets torn up when the permanent solution is made. So those aspects of the final design that inform this interim solution have been included by the work of EMH&T. That's still being reviewed by our staff. Again, the same approach we took for the connector we built on the Dale Drive connector when we knew it would ultimately be built to a different standard. We had them advance the design of that sufficiently so we knew from a location, elevation, although the stormwater obviously is a temporary facility, that the base of the road are as enlightened as we can make them in the context of the permanent design.
And so the requirement moving forward then would be the installation of the on-street parking, the permeable pavement, the granite curbs. Will this be a curbed road at present? It talks about a gutter or ditch scenario. Are we going to have any curbs on this temporary road?
Not temporary. Again, just as we don't on the section of the Dale connector that we built. But this would be finished out to the same level that John Shields Parkway would be. It is that same classification of road. So you would see the same permeable pavers for on-street parking, the curb gutter, the higher-end street finishes of that roadway. Ultimately, that would be the desire. Well,
But in the interim,
it's just a two-lane road. Very
and
simple.
will there be, my question is, will there be any curbs and gutters
No.
on the interim road?
No.
No.
It is built exactly as the city built this segment of the Dale Taller connector to that same interim condition, which has the ditch structure, it's 2 lanes of pavement, it has the multi-use path on it, and really interim lighting facilities.
So will the asphalt that is installed on this interim road, we'll call that interim rather than temporary, I guess, will that serve as a base coat or something for the ultimate finishes when we come back through with?
The charge that was given to EMH&T, who also did really all these other roadway for us and is intimately familiar with the standards on there, was to design it in a fashion that maximizes, to the extent that we can predict that today, the final grades and alignments of those. Part of the roadway that's being built here is a repaving of the existing road on Wendy's on there as well. This would be kind of the new constructions and the new construction pieces here. But they are being designed in a fashion so that as much of that base and roadways can be preserved. Now, if it's 15 years from now on there, you may have a pavement life issue where more reconstruction takes place than otherwise. But to the extent that we can align it, locate it, and build it, I can't tell you today exactly how much of each piece of pavement or base is going to be exactly where it needs to be when the final aspects of stormwater design are completed. But to the extent that they could bake that into this level of design, that has been done.
Okay. My next questions primarily have to do with plot B, C, and D on the map. All of these are somewhat gateway features into the city. And I want to make sure that absent development happening on these individual parcels, that we would not allow any signage on these parcels. I know that the Bridge Street Code was written to really try to build a community and not a development. And my concern is that if we introduce signage on any of these parcels, we are going to be making ourselves more development-oriented rather than community-oriented. And so I would like to add some language to this when we see it next time that would preclude any signage from happening on C, B, and D apart from redevelopment on those parcels. Because the signage code for Bridge Street would allow for, it's a far more liberal signage package than what we have in the balance of our community. And being in the Bridge Street district, there would be the possibility, as I read through the code and tried to line these parcels up with what the code says, of coming back and applying for a signage package that would incorporate signs on these parcels. So I don't know how my fellow council people feel, but I don't want to see any signage go up on those parcels absent redevelopment. My only concern relative to parcels in this package is with A, because of the size of it, the developability of it, and it being 2 acres. We have it on the books here from our acquisition residual at $525,000 for 2 acres, or roughly $270-ish thousand per acre. What do you feel the value of acreage is in the Bridge Street corridor of undeveloped land at this point in
For
time?
this particular piece?
In general.
Well, I mean, it very much depends on the configuration.
Sure, this is a principal frontage street. This is, it is adjacent to a vacant land.
I don't think it's a principal frontage street. I think those are defined as the ones around the exterior edges there. the appraisal we had done for it when the city was acquiring it had that $1.2 million acquisition appraised at $800,000. And part of that was because there's a stream that cuts through the site through this fashion. This property here, which is the daycare, is actually configured as a flag lot and has its frontage that comes through this location here. And because of the narrow depth that that leaves behind, its configuration for Bridge Street District type development is going to be a challenge to get much development capacity and the parking, which is really what unleashes the highest values on there. So the $1.2 million, we believe, and the per acre value result is probably a very good and fair and reasonable valuation on that, given the stream limitation, the configuration of the site.
And when was that valuation done? That was done prior to our purchase from CODA? Or
Prior to
was that more recent
Well, actually, we
than
didn't
that?
purchase from CODA, we traded with CODA on there, but I think the time of acquisition is in the memo on there. I'm guessing it was about 2014, I believe, 13, 14 on that time frame.
I would be interested in knowing what we feel like the value per acre is in the district. You know, I would hope with the $150 million-ish that we poured into that the property values would have gone up since then. So I would, that's the only one that I would like to maybe see some, just to check, to verify where we are. But additionally, I definitely want to see a signage prohibition on the balance of the parcels without significant redevelopment happening on that very parcel.
We'll seek an opinion from the original appraiser on this residual.
Right, thank you.
On that for your information between now and the next second reading.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, Terry, I just want to thank you for, you know, Dublin's always been famous for putting in the infrastructure first and reducing our traffic problems. It's always great to drive around inside Dublin, but once you sort of get out of it, things sort of tighten up. And this, again, is a continuation of that program to resolve our issues and put our infrastructure in first for the benefit of the community before it even develops. And I do remember you explaining all this in executive session about the stream and the values, and I know we beat this thing to death. And I'm not sure about the signage code issue, really. I know Bridge Street has, and we worked on that, some really restrictive signage. And so I guess, are you thinking about a generic general sign, or, you know, if parts of these become parcels of businesses, what kind of restrictions are you saying that you want to put on them?
Well, particularly the parcel out in front of the shops at River Ridge there, I believe it's parcel C on the map. They would possibly have the ability through the Bridge Street Code to have some monument sign, ground-mounted sign available on that parcel if it were to be incorporated into the shops at River Ridge. Additionally, down on B, if that were to develop, it's likely to develop, there would be signage potential there. John, I you know, read through the code and looked at these parcels. To me, it looks like there is some potential, and I'd like to protect us from that. And if it's a line in an agreement that protects us from that, I think it's ink worth spending.
Yeah, I just didn't want to impede the, you know, we have the restriction on quality of the signs for each of the businesses and how detailed they're going to be and dimensional and interesting. I just didn't want to do anything that might impede that, because I think that's one of the important aspects of the Bridge Street.
Well, I think one of the important things is upon redevelopment, those on that parcel, that restriction goes away. So I don't know that it restricts them in any way, shape, or form of whatever building they would put on there of having creative, high quality, and imaginative signs.
I think about that sign out in front of Dublin Village Center, that tower with the clock and all. Now it's just obnoxious, you know, 4 or 5 billboards essentially out there. And if you could prevent that.
So, Terry, is there a drawback to Chris's concern?
Yeah, why don't we come back with a recommendation for you with regard to that? I mean, another scenario would be, since you're just talking about those 3 parcels, if there anything that were proposed before redevelopment totally subject to council review and approval too, as another way if there's something that you would happen to like or want to have happen. But we'll come back with you with either that stipulation on there or some options. And we'll also understand a little clearer what the code limitations are, what kind of box gets left open if that limitation. We've been searching for those kind of things to include on restrictions. We want to make it clear they don't flip these sites to third parties, thinking there's development rights. We're trying to bake a lot of that into
Right.
the stuff as well. My biggest concern on B is that it gets its access through the site to the east on there, so we have stipulations in there requiring that on that at the time it redevelops, because really you've got severe access limitations. So we've been trying to think through all those appropriate limitations, but we'll explore the signage issue and come back at second reading with you on that as well.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
Anything else from council? Okay, we'll see everyone back on that issue on June the 26th. Resolutions, doubling back to the resolution removed from the consent agenda, 46-17, Ann?
Resolution accepting the lowest and best bid for the 2017 Storm Structure Maintenance Program.
Paul?
Paul, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't feel like I need a presentation. I just have a few questions.
That's good. I wasn't prepared for one.
I know you're always prepared. I know better. I just am looking at the map and where all of these bodies in need of repair are. They have something in common, is they're all in the same development. And so my question really was there some shortcoming in installation? This neighborhood isn't that old to need every, I did drive through the neighborhood. I didn't count every manhole with the red dot.
Right.
But it looks like nearly every inlet is needing repair, not more than maintenance. It is a repair situation. It appears, my untrained eye. And I'm wondering how virtually every single body failed in a neighborhood at the same time.
Actually, it's quite simple, and it's a situation we've been dealing with for several years. Back at that time, cinder brick were used to shim inlet, the castings for storm sewer inlets in the curb and gutter. We no longer use that. We actually use a polypropylene or polyethylene material instead of the cinder brick. And what has happened is the cinder brick just deteriorate over time. Could be our salt usage, could be the quality of the cinder brick itself, but we've been battling this for some time. So we no longer use those to shim storm or the castings, but that is what we're predominantly replacing.
So these were built per our specification at that time, so we don't
Correct.
have any recourse on the developer or anything else?
We would not.
They did what we asked them to do, and it failed? Okay,
That is true.
all right. That was my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions from council? Ann?
Vice Mayor Reiner? Yes. Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Leckleyder?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Resolution 47-17, Ann?
This is authorizing the addition of a new member, the City of Grandview Heights, to the Central Ohio Risk Management Association pursuant to Article 5, Paragraph 1 of the Central Ohio Risk Management Association bylaws.
I'll introduce it.
Thanks, Tim. Ron?
Yes, good evening, council members. The resolution before you this evening seeks council's approval for the addition of one new member to the Central Ohio Risk Management Association, also known as CORMA. This member is the City of Grandview Heights. By way of background, CORMA is the joint self-insurance pool of which the City of Dublin has been a member of since its creation in 1997. The pool provides a wide variety of property and liability coverage in its membership. In addition to the City of Dublin, the current membership includes the cities of Westerville, Upper Arlington, Pickerington, Grove City, Powell, Groveport, and Canal Winchester. This matter is before you, given that the CORMA bylaws require new members to be approved by resolution by at least 2/3 of the current member cities' governing bodies. And the CORMA bylaws also require prior approval by 2/3 of the CORMA Board of Trustees. Attached to the resolution is a memo from staff on this matter, accompanied by the exhibits providing in further detail. It should be noted that at this time, Grandview Heights has already been accepted into CORMA, as over 2/3 majority of the CORMA cities have approved authorizing legislation. Along with the City of Westerville, staff from the City of Dublin decided to hold off on requesting legislation approval until Grandview Heights was certain their decision to join CORMA. Unfortunately, the timing of the decision to join, coupled with the City of Dublin council meeting schedule, did not allow council to approve this legislation earlier. However, staff feels it is important The Dublin City Council records as well as Corma records reflect the city's consideration for Grandview Heights. After analysis by Corma's administrator of the property and liability exposures and loss experience of the city of Grandview Heights, the city would present a risk profile that would be appropriate for membership in Corma. Therefore, staff recommends approval of Resolution 47-17. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council? Hearing none, yeah.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
I'm abstaining on advice of city council. I'm sorry, of our city attorney. Yeah.
Resolution 48-17?
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Bill Wadley Swim Academy, LLC, for management and administration of the Dublin Community Swim Team and Summer Dolphin Swim Team programs.
Introduce it.
Thank you, Tim. Matthew?
Good evening, members of council. Resolution 4817 is in regards to the contracted service of managing, coaching, and administering the two Dublin swim team programs, the Dublin Sea Dragons and the Dolphins program. You'll recall a few months ago we had some public comment related to the evaluative process that staff was proceeding with. We have since met with multiple parents and concerned individuals, came to a collaborative point at which we feel is we are comfortable moving forward. So if it's okay with council, I'd like to give a really brief presentation just to help clarify some of the things that were brought up and where we are today, if that's okay. So just a really quick overview of what these two programs are. This Dublin Sea Dragons program, also known as Dublin Community Swim Team, it swims under the U.S. Swimming League, which is the national governing body of swimming. So with that, there is a certain level of competition that is engaging with that program. We have a system under this league through which age groups and color groups are defined. The age group program is a little bit more of the recreational based, and the color groups enter into a little bit more of the higher skills and a little bit more of the competitive nature of the sport. Currently, our program holds more than 200 participants. Sometimes it feels like 2,000. So the program itself is somewhat different from the Dolphins program. The Dolphins program is a very local program that swims under the NEW League. It's a more socially based and is generally recreational in nature. And currently, we have over 300 swimmers in that program. So as you can tell, we have a very popular program here in Dublin. So what I want to talk a little bit about is some of the issues that we've had with this program, primarily with the community, Dublin Community Swim Team, the Sea Dragon program. Part of our issues has been trying to define the general recreation versus a little bit more of the competition and elite part of what that program could be. And we, as the city, have managed this program with the focus priority to be the general recreation component of it. So in there lies a little bit of challenge for us to keep the program within its limits. So with that, sometimes we have an issue with a head coach and whether we hire that head coach, whether we contract with that head coach. We have a series of assistant coaches that also assist with the program. So trying to figure out the best process or manner through which we hire to balance out and make sure that we are accommodating the majority of the needs of the program has been somewhat of a challenge over the many years it's been in existence. With that comes an issue with staff supervision. Our staff is very professionally programmed, recreational program based, whereas the sport of coaching and athleticism is not necessarily our forte. It's a much more specialized scope and focus. Certainly we have some of the financial requirements. As you know, City Council requires our recreational programming to be a 50% cost recovery in aggregate across the board. So we take an administrative process through which we will identify fees to offset costs for various programs to make sure we achieve that goal. This program is one of them. I mentioned the parents and swimmer expectations with the recreational versus competitive components of the programs. This is one where we try to balance and accommodate as many as we can. But as you know, it's very difficult to achieve 100% satisfaction throughout the whole program. And certainly, we have some space limitations because this program shares the indoor pool at the recreation center with the high school program, as well as all of our recreational program that goes along with that pool. So our program evaluation process that initiated this, we were in a very unique situation where we had a position vacancy, and the program cycle was at a point at which we could really look at this from a holistic standpoint. So we used a lot of our evaluative process to analyze that history and overcome to try to overcome a lot of those challenges that we've faced over the years. One of those was to ask the question, what are the other local clubs doing to manage their programs that's different from ours, or vice versa? And that's what led to the proposals to find out how we might be able to consider a different approach to managing this program. From that, we had a list of must-haves from if we were to go down the road of a different direction, there are must-haves that we had to have with this program. One, that it had to be community-based. It would only accommodate Dublin residents and school district residents. It would remain this Dublin Sea Dragon logo and brand. And it would retain the current assistant coaches that are currently with the program. And we would continue to use the Dublin Community Recreation Center as the space dedicated for the program as well. The other item was that the booster group that's involved with this program would remain intact to make sure that the program had somewhat of a voice and input from the parents' perspective. And then certainly we wanted to ensure the program quality and safety. Those were the must-haves when we solicited proposals. Those were the must-haves that we are seeking today in this resolution. One of the interesting things about this was the fee structure itself. As I mentioned in the memo, this program, by nature of its components and several criteria through which the program is evaluated, the fee structure currently is, or the cost recovery rate for the program is significantly lower than what it should be, based on other similar types of programs that are of this kind of nature. In that, to the tune of we were around 60% cost recovery for the program as a whole, but with the competitive components, we envision that to be a little bit higher, up to the 75% target. So the fee structure associated with the program, regardless of whatever direction we take, I want to be clear that we would have to increase fees to get that target met, no matter what direction we took. So that was one of the things that we evaluated heavily, was the finances of the program. And I know I provided you all a breakdown of what that meant in the memo and some of the fee structures that would be associated with it. But by nature, when we evaluated the club programs that were offering a very similar program were charging in some cases twice as much as our program. So by nature, we tried to find that middle ground so that our program was still reasonably cost effective for the participants, but in the same sense, it was fair to the mission and the goal that we have is to reach that 50% in aggregate overall. So just to go through our evaluative process really quickly, several months ago we solicited some survey questions to understand some of the needs of the program. We solicited some proposals from the local clubs to understand what some of the other local clubs were doing in comparison to the Dublin program. We received 4 proposals in total from other clubs that wanted to take part in administering this program. We had of those 4 proposals, we had 3 of those that did not meet the must-haves. So we eliminated those immediately. We were down to 1. We developed a swim team, boosters, and parent review committee. Some of those members are here this evening, and I appreciate their attendance. That committee spent a lot of hours and a lot of time and a lot of evaluation and discussion with our staff to make sure we narrowed down and understood what we were trying to engage in and the outcomes of the program itself. So as I mentioned, the 3 proposals did not meet the must-haves. So we continued the evaluation of one viable option, and that one viable option is, as part of this resolution, entering into a service agreement with Bill Wadley Swim Academy. The current assistant coaches were also conferred with in a meeting with Mr. Bill Wadley and myself to address any issues and answer questions and understand concerns or questions that they might have about what it meant for them. Those meetings went quite positively. There was a lot of excitement. There were certainly some apprehension to some degree, but I think the overall meetings gave the notion that they were excited about this opportunity. We then conducted an all-parent meeting at which about 50 parents showed up for that meeting and had an interactive dialogue with staff and Mr. Wadley. That meeting was quite positive, again, addressing issues and answering questions. Certainly they were all warranted, but the overall meeting turned out to be a very positive meeting. We have, throughout the process, provided a series of team email updates, pardon the typo, throughout the process. And the service agreement recommendation before you tonight is what we ended up trying to accomplish. So the recommendation for you this evening is to approve that agreement. I want to make sure I'm clear on one thing and what this service agreement is not, because there were some concerns about what this means for this program. We are not selling the program. We are not farming out the program. We're not letting go of the program. We're not diminishing the program. What we are doing in the way of this service agreement, what it does and what it offers us the opportunity to do is to keep it a City of Dublin program. It's not going anywhere. The terms and parameters are predetermined. Those must-haves will remain intact in that agreement. There are things in this agreement that keep this program as intact as it possibly can. It will also remain focused on the recreational components as its priority focus, but it also allows more specialized service beyond the city's ability to take swimmers to a whole new level if they choose to do so. It certainly allows the program to increase in scope and certainly the opportunities for swimmers to increase as well. So the envisioned outcomes are the must-haves. Providers to have the ability, for the provider to have the ability to lead, manage, coach the teams holistically rather than just individually or on each level. Provide a training resource and mentor coaching staff and swimmers. Provide youth character development. Ability to streamline, align, and instill consistency with the swimmer transition throughout the program. Someone that's an advocate for youth sports and skills development. Someone that's highly reputable and creates a respected program. And certainly swimmer and parent satisfaction for all skill levels for both teams. And in the end, the financial savings for the city, this program, the way this agreement has worked out financially is the city will actually be saving money as a result of this program based on the amount of subsidy level that it currently provides. It will require the city to continue to provide payment for the service provider, but in a $20,000 savings the first year and $40,000 of saving the 2 subsequent years as a result. Those savings are to the city directly. So with that, I want to offer an introduction here to Mr. Bill Wadley. If many of you all probably recognize the name, maybe not. Bill is the retired head coach of the Ohio State University swim team. So I haven't joked with him yet about this, that him coming to Dublin is a step up now in his career. He's been coaching Big Ten, NCAA Big Ten Division swim teams for over 34 years. He's also very engaged with the community from a youth development standpoint, from a swim lesson program standpoint. Inner city kids, he's offering a variety of programs around Central Ohio. And I just want to introduce him and bring him up to the podium. If there's any questions you have for Bill or for myself, we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Coach Wiley, come on up.
Well, I'm not retired until 2 weeks from now, so 2 weeks to go, so my service is still intact for 2 more weeks, and I hope I still have a final paycheck. And on the way up here, I think I needed somebody to drive the car next to me. So when we were talking earlier about somebody having a great system to drive the car, I was thinking the person next to me needed somebody to drive it for them. So I sort of was in favor of that as well.
Well, great. So, and you said that some of the parents are you ladies the ones with the, do any of you want to comment anything? I got to tell you, Matt, from each time this issue has come up, there has been quite a bit, there's been a lot of interest and a lot of emotion, and I really appreciate that you handled this the way that you did. And it seems as though with Coach Wadley's introduction to the stage that it has sort of solved all problems, at least for the time being. Is that fair to say? I mean, everyone seems to be in agreement.
I would never say that as a public official.
Solves most problems.
Solves most problems, yes, sir.
Do any of you ladies want to comment or say anything? You don't have to. Great.
It's going to be, he's going to be a wonderful asset to our program, and I'm just so appreciative of the city and bringing us into the mix of having a conversation and making sure that the parents and the boosters were part of the whole conversation. So I thank you, and we all thank you for that. But we're excited. We're thrilled.
Fantastic. Great. Any questions from council for anybody? Tim?
Yeah, first of all, just one comment. To me, first of all, I don't know much about swimming. I did swim on my little neighborhood swim team as a youngster, and I chose other pursuits, let's put it that way. But I did have fun. But anyway, very impressive that we have you, sir, as part of the program now. Yeah, that's great. Welcome to Dublin. And I hope the parents and their children are certainly happy with the resolution here. The question that I had, Matt, I think that we do this as a matter of course with our employees, insofar as they're interacting with youth and so forth. I'm talking about a background check. Is there something in the agreement?
Yes. I don't know if, Bill, you want to comment on that, but there are provisions in there requiring background checks.
I'm thinking of the assistant coaches and so forth that
Yes.
will.
Yes, sir.
There is.
Yeah, everyone that's a member of the Bill Wadley Swim Academy, including the teachers or instructors for the swim school for children, all have to go through a background check process prior to, employment.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Coach. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Anything else from council? Okay, Ann?
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Sam Rose Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Under the other portion of the agenda, tree preservation policy, Claudia?
Good evening. I am here tonight representing the Planning Department, and my credentials are, I'm a certified planner. I am not a landscape architect. I am not a horticulturist. I'm not an arborist. I'm somewhat of a tree hugger, but I want to ensure you that I have a really good team behind me that consists of Brian Martin, who is a landscape inspector and a certified arborist, as well as Michael Hyatt, who are out in the field on my team every day, dealing with the subject, dealing with developers, and seeing firsthand what the city is achieving in tree replacement, as well as Sean Koretsky, who is with me here tonight, and he is the landscape architect out of the Parks and Recreation Department, and he has been working with his staff in horticulture, in forestry, and in the street tree and the Parks Department to make sure that what we're bringing to you tonight is our best foot forward. We've done a lot of research with the help of the Law Director's Office, and there's been many discussions, many meetings regarding of how you can approach this subject, and we're bringing you one by with no means, if you have other thoughts, other ideas, other expertise, other knowledge, we're happy to hear it and go forth with that. So just a quick summary, the tree replacement waiver policy that has been in place is based on what our zoning code requires for replacement for protected trees. So those are the trees that are 6 inches and above in diameter, and they are considered to be healthy and in fair condition, and they require inch-for-inch replacement if they are removed through development proposals. The policy to allow for a waiver of that replacement has been in place for approximately 16 years. And what the waiver has historically done has allowed for developments to replace trees on an tree-for-tree basis if they are 24 inches and below. So 24 inches and above would be considered landmark trees, and those would have still been replaced on a inch-for-inch basis. In the past 16 years, council has approved 22 waivers, has disapproved one waiver, and there were others that have been approved as part of TIF agreements or within planned unit development texts. So there's been a little bit of a mix, but for the most part, they have been standalone waivers that council has considered. And there was, in the fall of last year, a request to update the policy, and that is what we are here tonight to accomplish. This slide provides essentially the main update points. So we included an intent statement, which was something that the Planning and Zoning Commission had requested as they reviewed this at their May 18th meeting. We provided more criteria for sites that would be eligible for a waiver, so it's not a blanket, it is something that you have to work toward even being eligible to apply for one. We've strengthened and provided a lot more detail in the submission requirements, because currently there really aren't any requirements for what you have to do to apply for a waiver, so it's sometimes difficult to go into field and figure out which trees have been surveyed and which, if it's a heavily wooded site, it's sometimes difficult for my staff to figure out which trees we're actually looking at. We are providing a more defined assessment of the health of trees in the policy that we're proposing, as well as a prioritization of trees. So that is based on species, it's based on size, it's based on health. And with that, we are proposing a sliding scale of replacements. So if the tree is large, it's hardwood, it is a desirable species, we would propose that we replace that tree on a higher scale than we would a tree that is maybe smaller or it is not as healthy. The other main thing that we are proposing as part of the policy is that we would allow 33% of replacements to be evergreens and ornamental trees, and then also allow replacements for trees at 1.5 inch as opposed to 2.5 inch, which is what the code would require today. So that has been a lot of discussion amongst us in terms of availability, terms of diversity, native species, Ohio-grown trees that might be available in nurseries, as well as the growth of these trees would really get to the 2.5 inch within a couple of years. We did kind of provide this, this table that shows kind of the numbers of what code would be, what our current waiver would be, and what our proposed waiver would be. I have to be honest with you, my mom is a mathematician that must have skipped a generation, but we have tried to kind of summarize this, and I always try to focus on one or the other, whether it's trees or inches, so I decided to go with inches. So the 3 boxes that I have highlighted show, first box would be what code would, what has been removed on a site. So we picked random sites. We did Stansbury at Muirfield Village, which is that 11 acres in the heart of Muirfield there to the north, Hawthorne Commons, Riviera, and Autumn Rose Woods. Of these 4, Stansbury and Autumn Rose are sites that council has approved waivers for. And in that very first highlighted box, you see the inches that were removed on those sites. And you can see what the current waiver would require replacement to be, which sort of figured out is between 50 and 30% is what the reduction would have been in replacements. And then in the very last highlighted column is what we are proposing today. So that would be the mixture of 1.5 inch trees for anything that's not a landmark, and then 2.5 inches for anything that would be a landmark. And for the most part, the numbers are fairly similar, but we do get a little bit more diversity in species and in sizes. Autumn Rose is really the one that is the most significantly impacted by what we are proposing, mainly because that woodland was very significant. It was very large trees, it was very desirable species. So anybody who is removing trees that are larger between, let's say, 18 and 24 inches, and desirable species would have to replace them in a fairly significant number. We had discussions with Planning and Zoning Commission on May 18th, where we reviewed this proposal, and we had a little bit of a discussion on whether or not it's appropriate to allow the 1.5 inch for all trees that are not landmarks. And ultimately, from a staff perspective, we decided to go forward with that as a recommendation, mainly because we, A, don't expect every single tree to be replaced at 1.5 inch. And just the allowance of having more diversity and more availability in nurseries, we felt really strongly that that would be still a good suggestion to go forward with.
So Claudia, I just have one question, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
So
you're fine.
this policy, as I read it, and I think that you're saying is they are allowed to replace 100% of the trees with 1.5 caliber trees if they would so choose.
100% to the extent of trees that are not landmarks. So anything under a landmark tree, yes, that would be in the policy today. Mhm.
And when you mean in the policy today, as it exists today or as it's proposed
As
here?
it's proposed.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, this is my last slide. So the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the policy at their meeting, May 18th, and staff is also recommending approval tonight. And with that, I'm here for questions, as is Sean. He's ready to go.
Questions from council? John?
You know, I think that part of the idea of this, we had a landmark tree above 24 inches, which is really a huge, beautiful tree. I think the original idea was to try to get the developers to plan around some of these larger trees and create more interesting subdivisions, so that they're not so apt to come in and just cut down all the trees and then buy, in this case, 1.5 inch tree and put that in there. And I don't know if that was ever successful or not, because it requires a more advanced engineering to set the grades correctly so you don't damage the existing forest coverage. And I don't know if we had any, I don't know if there's any feedback on that or not, because instead of having houses that are on a cadence or that are all set 16 feet apart, the idea was hopefully the developers would come in and set the houses around the trees, and it would encourage them to come up with a more creative footprint for our subdivision instead of just rows of houses and houses in cul-de-sacs. It looks like you're switching this over to something that I'm very familiar with, and that's appraisals for trees about their quality. So if you're doing a tree appraisal for the state government, you're rating the species, its condition, and you sort of subtract as you go down the line, which I think is sort of a very fair way to do it. But I don't know.
There's maybe two answers to that as well. One of the criteria that we have suggested is that we would, to even be eligible to ask for a waiver, we would ask for a development to preserve 50% of their landmarks. And with that, we're really sometimes stuck at the timing of when the waiver comes versus when development has been approved. So one of the things we really need to hone in on, and I think the policy as we're proposing it would help with that, is to get this detailed tree survey at an early state. So when development is proposed, if somebody were to contemplate a waiver at that point, we have these submission requirements in place that would really allow us to hone in on, is the layout really working toward preserving the 50% of landmarks.
So we don't do that currently?
It is not a code requirement in a preliminary development layout, it's not.
Okay. And I think that might solve the site planning issue of placing the houses around the trees, making more interesting subdivisions,
Certainly.
creating a more interesting grading plan that fits, keeps the trees alive because we're not backfilling them, put a little more thought into the site work and end up with a much more interesting project.
Certainly.
So I think that's an important change, that somehow they come out and do an assessment, and because we got complaints, and I won't mention which project it was because I don't want to indict anybody or make them feel bad, but on a very large project. I noticed the neighbors already said, hey, they're sawing down all the big trees out there. Well, I didn't know that. Who would know that? Somebody driving by that maybe lives across the street noticed it, and so, whether they end up replacing those trees or not, I don't know, but, that's really sort of a shame, because, as we know, only God can make a tree, so, especially a big one, so. Anyway, so that would be my recommendation, that somehow there's some kind of inventory taken up front. And, because all I've seen so far are mainly projects that are just row-on-row houses, and it looks like they've totally disregarded the tree situation.
Yep.
Same way with their cul-de-sacs.
Certainly.
And if you plan these things out right, you can plant some of the trees into the center cul-de-sac. You can do a lot to make your subdivisions a lot more interesting, and I don't know if we're really getting that. I think they're either writing us a check for the tree waivers or cutting them down and planting them along the back. My other question is related to evergreens. You said, and this is an interesting, I don't know how you're doing a comparison on this. When we're talking about deciduous trees and trunk inch calipers, we got a fixed element that we know its value and we can relate to it and either increase it, lower it, or take cash for it. But when you're transferring it to evergreens, how are you doing that? Say you're cutting down an 8-inch oak or a 12-inch oak, and then how is that transferred over to evergreen elements? If you're giving them the option to put in evergreen trees, spruces, let's say, or pines, I don't understand. Is that going to be traded off by trunk inch caliber too, or is it, because normally in the industry you switch over to a height when you go into an evergreen design over a deciduous design. So I guess it's unclear to me how that happens.
We were looking at mainly the diversity aspect of that, so that, we've got requirements for the larger trees have to go back into 2.5, so we're not going to transfer a champion tree into a evergreen. But for buffer edges and stuff, right now, we don't have the ability to put evergreens in, so that we can create better buffers for housing and such to other developments. So that's why we limited it to 33% of what they were allowed to change into evergreen.
And I
With
guess
priority scaling, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good suggestion, because it gives we got a zoning code where we have two different zonings abutting each other, commercial and residential, and you have to create a barrier, either a mound, a wall, or a screen of some kind, which I think is really wonderful. And it took a lot of the fight out of zonings years ago, like 20, 30 years ago when we came up with this, because everyone was concerned about what they were seeing that was on their property line. And I think we were the first community in the state of Ohio to enact something like that. And that really ended a lot of zoning conflicts and got a lot of people out of here that were in here worried about the value of their site. But I guess I still don't understand if you're cutting down an oak tree that's 8 inches or 10 inches, how do you transfer that to say you want to create a evergreen screen along the back property line, give the people privacy? What's the value transfer for a deciduous tree versus an evergreen tree? I guess I don't understand that.
And I guess with the industry standard being that evergreens are measured in height, but what we're saying here is we would still measure them in caliper for that inch for inch replacement.
You may want to
I just wondered what
relook at that
kind of
and think
value
that,
system you were using on that, because an evergreen tree will have a pretty big caliper and won't be that big of a tree compared to a deciduous tree. So I was just curious how we were boiling that process down.
Yeah, that with the limitation of the 33%, it was a balance that we were trying to create with trying to have that extra buffer as well in that diversity.
you may want to rethink that, and maybe it's, every 4 foot of an evergreen tree is 1 inch caliper. So if you had an 1.5 inch caliper, it might be start with a 6 foot evergreen. Because they're not going to be able to buy them by the caliper inch, and that would leave you to go measure the caliper inch of all of these trees that were installed, and I'm not sure that's how you want to use your time. So, we might want to make a transitional something.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that, because there's no relationship between
Right,
deciduous and
they're
evergreen trees,
two
so.
completely separate measurements.
Yeah, and you would never measure an evergreen tree in a trunk inch caliper situation. It just doesn't happen in the industry. So the idea of what you suggested, 1 inch tree's worth 4
4
foot,
feet.
3 foot, whatever.
1.5 inches would be a 6 foot, which is the minimum size you'd really want to install, I think, at, So then if you had a 2.5-inch caliper tree, that would be a sizable evergreen, then you'd have a 10-foot, which would have the same kind of impact on the landscape as a 2.5-inch caliper deciduous tree.
And I think you're being very fair about your professional analysis on valuation, because really, when you go to court, and I've been in there before, and you're trying to state the claim of the value of the trees, it's really done the way you're saying. It's species, quality of the tree, its current situation as to its health, and all those factors, and then you just start taking a statistical number and start doing deducts on that tree until you get, which is pretty realistic appraised value of that element in the field.
If I could ask a question quickly. Claudia, I appreciate all the work that's done on this tree waiver policy. We've always had a tree waiver policy, and it seemed like it wasn't so much what we were arguing about, though I agree that these are improvements and certainly very thoughtfully done. But it seemed where the conflict came and where finally this issue came to a head was here at council. A developer came and they wanted to get out of part of their responsibility. And they wanted to do that via paying less money than they would have been required. And the sort of question came, well, we have always, for years and years, allowed developers, if they're making a good faith effort in our council's estimation, to replace trees, put money into city coffers to put trees someplace else. We would give them that waiver so they wouldn't have to pay as much. So what changes with this policy if they, they're required to do certain things, but what if they choose not to and they want, to come and ask council for, instead of paying $250,000 as we would have to per the policy, we want to pay $50,000 because without that, our site's undevelopable. So I'm just trying to figure out if this sort of solves the problem that we were wanting to solve, which is, making developers actually replace trees and not come to council and ask for money, money back for, trying.
The money issue really isn't addressed differently. If somebody were not to be able to fit all the trees on their site or replace them, well, or it costs too much, the price would be the same. Nowadays, for example, I'll pick on Autumn Rose again, I'm sorry. So if they, with the current waiver, would have had to replace $60,000 worth of trees, which is the 601 number. With our proposal, it's somewhat punishing them for having really good trees on their site that they're removing, although it is 5% of trees on their site, compared to everybody else who removed a significantly higher number of trees. Their replacement, if it was just monetary, as we're proposing it today, would be $93,000. So there is still potentially some discussion to be had on whether or not, as a development goes forward and the commission and city council consider it as part of a planned unit development, if there are unique circumstances where it may be worth having a discussion. And Autumn Rose, I would say, definitely falls within that category. So they're the ones that really, under our new proposed policy, would have to have more replacement, either in inches or in money.
Claudia, what if we looked at not what they were removing, but what they were preserving?
Exactly, it is definitely.
And maybe there are some credits there that are given for preservation because, Autumn Rose had, I'm going to get the number wrong because it's been several weeks, but I think it was 40% of their site was not going to be developed. It was going to be largely untouched.
Correct.
And was going to be parkland of the city. And So I'm wondering, playing a little Monday morning quarterback here, but if there isn't a way, rather than saying that they removed this many inches, maybe there is some calculation that said they preserved this many.
It is definitely a discussion we had. What we ultimately landed on was that that particular site is so unique, and there aren't seemingly any left in the city that could have that particular example. Maybe not in the city. There might be outlying areas that we might annex where that could be an issue as well. But in Autumn Rose, that was definitely something we had not yet.
Well, if we were to extrapolate that same information and apply it to Riviera, they probably would not have gotten the credits. So instead of the penalization that we see here on a site similar to Autumn Rose, to John's point, I think if you really want to encourage the preservation of these larger trees, maybe we don't penalize them for cutting them down, maybe we give them credit for letting them stay.
It's definitely something we're.
I agree. One of the things I looked at was, my question here was, I think that this provides, and this is just from a business perspective, not from a preservation perspective, it does provide the ability to have some flexibility in terms of what gets put back, right? But it still has that monetary piece, and until we sort of address and figure out how to allow for some flexibility with the monetary piece, we're still going to have, to Amy's point, businesses coming back in front of council asking for waivers. So I think there needs to be some additional thought, whether it's a credit type of a system or something of that nature. I don't know what it is. I'm definitely not, horticulturist or arborist. Thank goodness you guys are there, because it's not my forte. But I do think there needs to be some level of monetary flexibility to help alleviate the situation that really brings them in front of us, which is the monetary aspect, more so than which trees get removed and which ones don't.
So I know that I'm assuming we're not seeing the final revision of this tonight. I have a couple other thoughts. From going from a 2.5-inch caliper tree to an 1.5-inch caliper tree, it was appropriately indicated in there that, in 5 years' time, the 1.5-inch caliper tree might be larger than the 2.5 caliper tree because of delays in adaptation and all of those sorts of things. However, when you go shopping for 1.5-inch caliper trees, you frequently find yourself in the container-grown tree department. And there are some inherent challenges with the long-term benefits of a container-grown tree versus a field-grown tree. So I would like to see something added to this that might preclude some container-grown trees, particularly when you get into taproot system kind of trees like oaks and things like that. Their root system has been compromised if it's been grown in a container, and it might never come to fruition because of being root-bound and a number of other issues. So I'm not necessarily opposed to the 1.5-inch caliper tree, but I would, particularly species-dependent, preclude container-grown trees from being substituted because of the way they would perform long-term in the landscape. I also liked Planning and Zoning's recommendation to limit the percentage of the 1.5-inch caliper trees.
Okay.
An 1.5 inches is, far less than this glass, and that can look like a twig sometimes going in. So maybe we have some limitations on the quantity or the percentages of 1.5-inch caliper trees, and maybe we introduce 2-inch caliper trees. We don't necessarily have to jump from 1.5 to 2.5 inches. That's, that's a big leap. And maybe we say, that it can be so many, this percentage can be 1.5 inches, this percentage can be 2-inch, and this percentage should be 2.5 inches. So I'd like to explore those issues. And then there is a species, genus, and family designation from the binomial nomenclature. And I'm wondering, what is the family? Is family, as indicated in your definitions, is that evergreen versus deciduous? Because your genus species, really all you have left is cultivars. So when you introduce a family representative of no more than 30% from any given family, what are you referring to? What are the different family categories definition?
That would be the full species, so oaks across the board, I believe is what that was.
You know what, I don't see how, there's quite a few significant questions here. I think maybe we should table this, and you talk with the people who know these issues and flush out some more of these.
Yeah, I just want to add a
Maybe,
couple.
I mean, we would love to have this at Community Development Committee if your experts would be willing to have us.
Well, you know, and just to go on along with what Chris said, so we might not even have to go there, is that your variation on we found that it's untrue, that it's generally about a 3.5 inch tree that stalls out after that, and the smaller tree surpasses it. So this idea about an 1.5 inch tree may not be horticulturally true. What Chris was saying, you know, a 2-inch tree might be a lot better if it's B and B. And you're right, you're absolutely right, you're going to end up with potted trees that dry out pretty quick. And there should be just a few variations made for that, like sourwood that does have a taproot, and you can grow it in a container pot.
Some of your beaches?
And if you cut them later on, you damage them. You guys already know all that anyway, I'm sure. So which ones you can ball and which ones you can't, and which ones have central taproots. And maybe those could be container trees in your guidelines. But the idea that a 1.5 inch tree will end up surpassing a 3-inch tree or 2-inch tree probably isn't true, because that doesn't happen until about a 3.5 inch tree versus, or a 4-inch tree versus a 6-inch Doug tree. And the American Nurserymen's Association has standards for the increased ball sizes, so that mitigates that retardation of growth. So, because the ball sizes gets bigger as the trunk caliber increases.
I'd be happy to participate in whatever it is, given if I am able. I do want to make the note, though, of your family versus genus designations. Those are the same thing if you're talking about the same kind of tree, all oaks or quercuses, and that is their genus. So when you say oaks and you say quercus in the same category, you're really, now you've said 50% of the trees can be the same thing, so.
Good point, thank you.
But I'm happy to participate.
Yeah, I think we need to, I'll make, Tim?
Yeah, just real quickly, not along the lines they were talking, the fee in lieu, Planning and Zoning Commissioner raised the question whether, you know, that should be revisited. It's been $100, I guess, for a long time. I saw in one of the tables that you provided, you know, that some others were charging $125, maybe more, just something to put out there. I mean, I don't know whether that covers our true replacement costs. You know, I would think obviously we want to do that. I mean, that's the purpose of collecting it, right? So anyway, just thought I'd put that out there.
Well, now, just about everybody has expressed a concern. If I make a motion to table this, what should we do with it between now and then? Can you just work it out with staff and talking to, like, you know, Amy's concerns she expressed, if we can address those, and John's and Chris's, and what's the best way to advance this?
I mean, do you want to, so you're not interested in referring to committee?
No, I think we've given them enough information. I think with the idea that, you know, we probably have to have some kind of tree inventory before the project starts is very important, so because we know what the developer's really cutting down. And also, like, if you got a 3 or 4 foot tree, you know, you'd like to see some creativity in the urban planning now instead of just row houses, ticky-tacky houses all in a row. So, I mean, if that was made part of it, and then the changes that Chris and I and Amy and everybody else mentioned, I think could be incorporated, I think we'd end up with a pretty good set of rules.
I think that, I mean, in the interest of not having another, I mean, I'm not interested in saying that we should have another meeting, but staff asked specifically, I'm thinking you, Mr. Reiner, with your expertise, and Ms. Ambrose Groom's level of expertise, I mean, you're the tree people on council. You're talking about design things that we want to promote, which I think we all agree with. I'm a little concerned about saying, well, you know, you get rewarded for saving this, and you don't get a penalty if you don't save it. That suggests to me that we're going to lose a tree. You know, I think there's the carrot and stick, and I think a lot of cases a stick works better, unfortunately. But that would, it seems to me that would flesh out really what we're trying to get at here, which is saving more trees, more creativity, you know, in the interest of saving trees, and plus all the, genus and species and taproots and no containers versus containers, and that sort of thing could get fleshed out at a committee level where, we're kind of spinning our wheels here.
And if I may, we might have a second round of Beautify Your Neighborhood grant applications later in August, so we might actually be able to have two birds, one stone, kind of.
Who's on that committee? So Chris, or you, and Christina?
I'm the ignorant one on the committee.
I guess then I would make a motion to table this and refer the matter to the Community Services Committee.
Okay.
Thank you so
Is there a
much.
second?
I'll second.
Ann?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes, thank
Ms.
you.
Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Sorry, I'm sorry, Ms. Amorous Grooms?
Yes.
Okay. Historic District Parking Garage, cost and capacity update, and then we have an architecture update. Terry?
Good evening again. What we wanted to do with the memo that we sent you this evening, and I hope the 4 pages were not too crazy to follow, but try to pull together some of the history on the parking structures related to what kind of initially was thought with regard to the capital program as it emerged, where the 450 space number came up with that we kind of based on the capital plan. And then, as you notice, when we move forward with the more detailed planning of the site and determined during that basic planning phase and before that in fact that 4-level parking garage would yield additional spaces, we wanted to bring that information to you tonight, put some context on it with regard to what parking garages cost and the different things that affect efficiency on garages. And the last piece I think we wanted to get before you was, after this discussion on the kind of cost and capacity that we've given you in this memo, we wanted to also have the cost estimates prepared for the 2 facades that you'll be considering at this evening's meeting. The current 5-year CIP had a 450 space allocation. It's actually based on that from a couple of years ago. That was an analysis put on early when Walker was retained by the library, working with NBBJ to kind of figure out what could work on the site. The site configuration was not finalized at those points, and obviously it was a preliminary kind of layout, and that produced that number that then informed the capital planning. As we move forward and the streets got established and all the other elements got established, and we actually initiated schematic design on the project, as you learned a couple months ago, we were able to get a parking garage that would yield 549 spaces. And it's about 100 spaces more than what had been put in the initial capital plan. Obviously, 100 additional spaces doesn't cost the same as a 450 space garage does. So we try to give you some of the cost implications of things that were done here, and also we wanted to look at different scenarios of how, if this thing were value engineered in a meaningful way, what kind of things produce different kinds of cost adjustments. And we laid out those kind of main scenarios that produce the most meaningful level of adjustments on this. The very first idea that we had, for example, was in this parking garage that you remember runs from North Street to Rock Crest, was to actually just remove spaces in the middle. We thought that would be, okay, we'll do that, you'll reduce that by that amount, what's that do for us? Pull it in from the streets. Unfortunately, the ramp system no longer worked when we did that. So a lot of things that were tested basically messed up the geometry of the whole garage kind of operating properly. But the elements that we looked at in terms of various cost savings, one of the metrics we put in here was how efficient is that loss? If a space is costing me $20,000 to $25,000 a space, if I design that one away, what am I saving? If I'm saving $5,000, which means I'm already paying $15,000 for that space that I'm not getting, that's a very inefficient loss. The most efficient cost reduction, if you wanted to make meaningful cost reduction on this, would be elimination of the 4th floor. And that would eliminate 150 spaces. And at that level, you get close to those $15,000, $16,000 of savings, but you take the number down to 400 spaces. The additional spaces that you are adding, the 150, you're building at probably the least cost that you will ever build a structured space for, at about $17,000 a space. So those last 150 spaces, from a structured parking perspective, I think we can safely say you'll never build those parking structures that cheaply again. on there. So it is a very efficient layout. The cost implications of those additional 149 spaces compared to what's currently in your CIP. You had $10 million in your CIP for the last 2 years. We also had added to that, if you remember in our deal with the library, that they would contribute equal to the cost of 200 surface parking spaces. That produced a little over another million. That produces the 11 million and change budget that you see in here. So to add that additional 150 spaces on here would require that number to increase by $1.7 million. That's very consistent. In fact, that's $17,000 a space. That's less expensive than normal in terms of that's all in. On the costs with regard to that very, very efficient add on that would be the net fiscal impact of that with the metal fin facade that you have seen. The other side you will see this evening, which is the terracotta, has a $650,000 add to that, should you prefer that option as well. But over the base design that we've shared with you before, the additional 150 spaces are adding $1.7 million. Administration's reviewed those options, looked at the design, obviously, that is reviewed by council on the 4-level garage, and we agree that it is an appropriate location and incorporation. We're not asking you to revisit the issue that you visited in the basic plan. But we felt it was important from a budget and a capital planning perspective that you understand there is a cost implication to that. Make any decisions with regard to this in that context, and are recommending that you do pursue the 549 space garage. With that information, happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this information or any additional stuff that you'd like us to bring back. Happy to do that as well.
How many spaces does the current library have surrounding their facility?
About 100.
Really?
100 and change.
So we're going to be 5 times that.
They have a lease to 200. So what you'll be producing for the public parking, if you do the 549, is 350 public parking spaces.
Well, come Sunday night and you go look at their
Yep.
lot, it's all filled up. And I'm just curious, and then we have a few parked up at the school, not a few, a lot. So we're going to have plenty of parking with this, I would presume.
And we have preserved the rights to their parking as well. With regard to the school lot, couple items on that. We do have a long-term lease on the remote lot there, but it's year-to-year cancelable by the school. So if the school ever needs that parcel, that surface parking goes away with regard to it. And also, as we're doing some of the final design on Franklin, there could be some of those edge spaces that get impacted. But the bottom line is you would get designated 349 public parking spaces added to this beyond what the library would be getting under this scenario.
So right now, in the school lot, how many spaces?
I don't have that number in front of me.
I'm going to say it's like 80 maybe? Or is that the Darby Street lot that I'm thinking of?
I would say that's a fair 60 to 80. Plus it has the handicap parking for the grounds of remembrance and other elements there, which are now met by the garage.
And then in the Darby Street lot,
Again, don't have that space count here.
you don't know?
No.
Does anybody know the Darby Street lot? I'll pull it up on Google Maps and count, but
But one of the things, obviously, the more of your parking capacity you can get included in this garage, the opportunities for something like a Darby or another lot developing in the future.
right, that's my point. We take away Darby, we take away the school potentially. How many spaces are we looking at right now versus
Right.
the garage?
Yep.
Do we know, and maybe this is a way late question to ask, but what are the parking needs? I mean, I guess we could presumably make it an 8-foot story parking garage
Right.
and have 2,000 spots.
You get a very, very cheap per space.
So yeah, you get real cheap per space.
Yep.
What are the needs?
I think we've asked the consultant, part of the workshop you're going to have on parking last week, with regard to just their feedback on this parking facility as well. And I think the reason they kind of are supportive of the approach we're taking is that it gives you flexibility with those surface lots. Generally, I mean, one of the things that that was a negative for kind of downtown Columbus for years was you had so much land devoted to surface parking. You really got rid of the whole notion of kind of walkable areas because all really great prime located sites were surface parking. One good thing parking structures do is make those sites available for structured parking. So it does strongly encourage that capability going forward. In terms of what the demand will be, when the library's open, and the park, and the pedestrian bridge across the street, and the plazas, and all the restaurants, I mean, we can project and think what those things are going to be going forward. To build this much capacity, you're building more than current demand. You're building stuff to handle future demand, and probably stuff to handle future development opportunities. But because it is so expensive to, say, build a 3-level garage and try to add a 4th level to it later, that gets real inefficient again. On that, the notion of that, or building your next structure, those become very, very expensive options as future development in and around that area creates an additional demand for parking.
While at the same time removing currently used parking lots.
Yeah.
So my concern, Terry, is that, we had all of the debate about the library and the size, and people thought, oh my God. When I look at these two buildings in comparison to each other, the parking structure seems much more onerous to me than the library does. And you're saying that this increase of 100 and whatever it is, 149 additional spots isn't changing the footprint or the?
Yeah, the 4-level garage is what we have always shown you.
And those are all the pictures we've had have been a
Yeah,
4-level
they've
garage.
always been the 4-level on there. What you'll see tonight when you see the renderings next on this are still that same 4-level garage. So we're not proposing anything different than what you've seen. What we're pointing out is the fact that because we got so much more space yield out of that footprint than we had thought, these things cost a lot more concrete, a lot more. You're building 100 additional parking spaces on there. Your capital plan adjustment, it needs to be adjusted if you're going to add 100 spaces to this garage. The negative side of it is, if you're going to remove logically and cost effectively, you're going to get rid of a floor. So removing 150, which is what you lose with a floor, takes you down to 400, which is less than what you had originally programmed.
Okay, so option 4 on here, which is to remove the 4th floor, then all the renderings would have to be changed. Everything we've
Yep.
seen would be changed,
Yeah,
because
you'd-
it'd all be
the-
shrinking.
Structurally, you'd be doing, or in terms of the schematics, you'd be doing massive redo of the schematics.
So there's no, my gut is telling me that we are inflating this balloon, and it is getting bigger and bigger, but we're not.
No.
It's the same size balloon, we're just more efficient.
It's really
with
what
the
it has
spot.
been since the library first looked at the site 3 years ago with Walker, with their building and contemplating a 4-level garage adjacent to it.
And so if it's just an efficiency internal to the structure, why does it cost so much more money?
Because you're adding 100 more spaces of square feet of concrete in terms of spaces and aisles. What we did was put in a plug and said, these things cost about $20,000 a space. Now, that's a hard cost number that people tried to achieve to for a while. It's kind of pushing above that now, plus your soft costs. So if you had 450 at 20,000 space, $9 million, add the other million that the library's kicking in, that gave you some room to grow it a little and have your soft costs covered. What we've been able to yield is 150 more spaces, or 100 more spaces than that, with regard to that, actually go to 549. And with that, this thing pretty much equates to amount of concrete that you're using in this structure. I mean,
So you're not just putting the stripes in a different place?
No.
I mean, this is a different building, but it's the same size from the outside.
yes, it's in the same location, same scale as what has been contemplated for the site. It's just much more efficient. When the layouts were looked at early on, and we started, we looked at the 3 aisles and the 3 drive aisle arrangements and all those kind of elements there, it lends itself to a very efficient layout. You get the full width of 3 aisles on it. You get the good transition on the ramps going up. You see other sites, I think Block A over on Bridge Park, where it's much more kind of a contorted site, much less efficient. That may be 400-plus square feet per parking space as opposed to mid or lower 3s here. And those costs just become much less efficient. This garage construction, because of the rectangle that it's on, is a nice, efficient layout.
Terry, what are our soft costs?
Soft costs would be all your design fees. I think they're laid out in the estimate there. Would include I think it has the CM manager fees in it. There's a series of those standard soft costs. We can give you the breakdown on that. But we had those included and broken down as parts, so we weren't just giving you a hard cost estimate.
I'd like to see that. I think it's important to remember that we set out to build a 450-space garage. That's what our needs told us that we were looking for. That was the goal that we had set. I think that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we have violated our code for appearance and height so that we could go to 549. And if we come to the 400 number by removing the upper floor, we solve a number of problems. One, we solve the need to violate our code in terms of height. It will come back closer to the heights that we had intended. The massing and scale would certainly help. And we're only 50 spots off of what we originally set out to build. And we've not spent the nearly $2 million additional dollars that, this fourth story is going to cost us. To me, this is a great way for us to get, to solve a number of the problems we have. We talked extensively about how are we going to transition? How are we going to transition in the parcel immediately to the west? How are we going to transition to the parcel immediately to the south? This will help us, if this garage is not quite as tall, it will help us make those transitions certainly in a simpler format. I think the additional nearly $8 million it's going to cost us a lot of money. When we originally set out to build 450 spaces. I don't know that I'd agree that we'll never build parking spaces less. I'm hoping that we don't have to build more parking spaces. I hope that the arrangements we enter into as we go down this road are more similar to what we did across the street and say, you build your parking into your structure. With the grade changes in this area, you have a lot of opportunity for bank barn type of parking garage structures where you don't have internal movements from varying floors, where you can enter floors at different elevations. You see a lot of those out at Easton, where they'll have on this story, you enter from this direction on the second story, and from the first story you enter from another direction because of the natural change in grade. Those are far less expensive when you don't have to navigate internally. Those get far more palatable per spot than the ones that you have to navigate internally. So I don't know that we'll never have the opportunity to build at this price. I think that we might if we encourage it. And I don't know that we have to build a parking space for everyone future development in the district. We held them to the standard of providing their own parking across the street. In the condo building that is, looking like it's nearly coming to fruition. I don't know that it's our job to build a parking space for everybody that wants to do business in historic Dublin. We need to solve the problems for the folks that are there, certainly. And the 400 spots that we set out to, the 450 spots that we set out to do that, I'm assuming you did a study before we did 450 spots, and we deemed that was appropriate. Otherwise, I don't know where we would have come up with that number. So, I'm not supportive of spending the extra money, particularly because it requires us to violate our own codes.
Chris, can I ask you a question? How would you address future demand?
Well, sure. I think that future demand will have to be handled the same way that we have in the immediate past handled future demand. So like in the condominium building with the restaurants and so forth, they are self-parking for their facility. And it's my understanding that there will be some additional parking that will be available for the public in that facility as well. I would imagine that a developer would come in and would have to assemble some parcels and have to contribute to a fund that would build a structure that would suffice to park whatever it is that they're doing, be it housing, restaurant use, office use, or commercial use, the same way everyone else in the city has solved the problem, is they build that cost into the portion of their development. I don't know that we're never going to be able to keep up writing checks to park every car in the historic district. You got to remember, this district is huge. It's 5% of our city, and it's going to be very dense. So are we going to solve everyone's parking problem for future development in the district? And if so, how in the world are we going to finance that? If no one's ever responsible to contribute to parking of their own.
Well, I don't think that's being suggested, that all future development, be managed by an additional 100 spaces. But can somebody on staff tell me if they recall what we paid for the Darby lot?
I don't know what we paid for that at that point. If I could, there's a couple issues I think related to this. That's extremely valuable land. Obviously, it's well located.
Yeah, I'm thinking, in my mind,
sensors.
the best possible outcome is that surface lot goes away and is developed with something, but with those spaces going away,
Yeah.
obviously, it'd be ideal to replace those. And
You reinforce its redevelopability significantly. That doesn't mean you provide parking rights in your new structure to a developer at no cost. Realize all those parking structures you see getting built aren't being developed or paid for. They're being paid for out of what normally would be real estate and property taxes. They are TIF revenues that are being reinvested towards and building the parking structures. That's what's making those possible. So it's public funds of a different source that are underwriting those costs. Obviously, in a library, in a public parking situation where you have no real estate taxes being paid, it's a different scenario altogether with regard to it. So your ability to have supply that you could sell or rent or use in various kind of purposes on this going forward, you'll have that flexibility. And obviously, the development rights in and around there certainly do get enhanced. But right now, our solution has been to consume. If you see the library, which is overwhelmingly surface parking, you've got Darby, which is surface parking. We moved to the school and added more surface parking. You're putting in really a very suburban sea of surface parking up there where you're still getting it significantly underserved. I think from a design review perspective, we feel very comfortable with the 4-level. I think when you look to the west, it's a 3-level garage because it does have 1 level underground. A 3-level garage really is a roof on a 2-level building, and I think the renderings you'll see tonight don't view that as being significantly at all problematic or out of character with the surrounding area, and that does have a second floor that enters from a different road, I think in a very, very efficient manner on that moving forward. So I think from our perspective, the ability to handle that supply here, even if in the long term, if the automated driving and other things start to significantly reduce the demand, probably what that does is open up then those other sites that have surface parking into ready redevelopment, and this becomes that supply on a going forward basis on there. So I think that's another advantage. But if there's a development that occurs, the city is going to make those parking spaces available under a financial arrangement that the city deems is appropriate, and maybe it captures TIF revenue off that new development to reimburse itself for part of the cost of this parking structure. So there's a lot of those kind of unknowns. But from an opportunity perspective, we think it's very wise to pursue it at this point.
Terry, for some reason, I seem to remember that Darby lot's 154 spaces. It would be interesting to know how close to that 150 additional you're trying to put on the fourth floor it is.
It is.
It's 154, isn't that the number?
On the 4th floor?
No, on the Darby lot.
Oh, I don't know.
It's about 100 spaces.
About 100 spaces. So,
You counted 154?
to me, the most important part would be
100?
the fact that you could open the Darby lot up for redevelopment and to have those spaces taken care of at the cost you're talking about, which is roughly $17,000 a space. That makes sense. And heaven knows we've been trying to get a parking structure down there for at least 10 years since I've been on council, maybe longer. We've talked and talked and talked about it until we finally got the critical mass on it and decided we needed to do something, so.
I look at this from an incremental cost perspective. For an additional $143,000 a year, you're going to get 149 spaces. That's $1,000 a space per year. That's a lot of parking, a lot of movement, a lot of extra capacity for an additional $1,000 per space per year. And I realize that's more debt, that's a little bit longer, but over time to pay that. But I think that's a pretty reasonable price to pay on an annualized basis to cover an additional 149 spaces. So the additional cost of that if you do that math, I think comes out to about $1,000 a space on a debt basis on it annually. So that's not a bad price to pay to get an additional 149 spaces. I think, too, I think about what are the other uses beyond just those coming down to partake in retail activity. There's special events, there's potential of school events there, there's redevelopment opportunities, there's all these other opportunities. We just want to make sure you're not passing up on the opportunity to incrementalize this without changing the height of this anymore. I realize some of the angst and concern about that, but, you know, you're not having to change that height anymore to gain that 149 spaces. So certainly that's why I felt good about presenting that to you as an option to consider.
The one other element, just with regard to the way these things are funded and paid for, as you'll notice on Crawford Knowings Bridge Park East, there's now 3 parking structures, Block B, Block C, and Block A, as well as the one on the west side. It's around Building Z. That's 4 parking structures, all of which have been able to be financed by the tax increment that they pay, and have been able to help kind of self-fund those. This one is the first purely public municipal lot, kind of funded out of your general capital improvement funds on this, as you have done with downtown investments in the past. It's going to be more of a challenge in the historic district because of, you know, limitations. It's much smaller blocks, much smaller buildings to kind of address those parking needs as they occur on there, as opposed to the larger kind of development sites that you have to work with on the east side of the river, where I think Bridge Park East has kind of established a model. Doesn't mean it'll all be structured parking. In certain densities that won't be needed, and maybe it's platform parking in some other locations where those kind of things work. But I think for the downtown, where you can get this concentration of parking, opening up lots of future possibilities by doing that kind of going forward, I think it gives you maximum flexibility without consuming really desirable surface land in the historic district.
Yeah, do you have any idea what the Darby lot's worth currently, real estate prices?
Probably depends what kind of development rights somebody gets on it. Anybody who buys it's going to have a contingent contract to see what you put on it with regard to, I'm sure it has high value on there, but it depends. It's probably a 2.5-story kind of building is contemplated on that with regard to that. Probably the premium rents that anybody would get from a.
Well, and I think we can assess that, you know, per the previous direction tonight, to take a look at some of the land values there. That was the direction given to us earlier, so we'll take a look at that as well.
You know what Chris said about future development, I think they should pay for their own parking, and there's no cities that goes out and buys your parking lots, and I agree with, you know, future development. Of course, this is the library, it's a separate issue, and it's also a downtown that really has a hot mess going on every time you want to go down there and do anything, because there's no place to park, and you just drive around and around, and I'm sure it's a detriment to our businesses. I just was down at the Columbus Art Festival yesterday, and I was looking over the bridge, and I was thinking, now that you guys have, and I'm proudly would say the staff and you, Terry, and Dana and the whole team and the city council has taken this extra step to build this really neat park on the other side of the river and on this side of the river. And then, you know, sort of bold planning, very courageous. But I was looking at the huge crowd that was down there. And I also noticed that somebody actually started a kayak rental during this art festival, and there was people out in the water kayaking around. And, you know, you think back to Wally Maurer, when Wally used to say, you know, yeah, the Irish festival's cool, but maybe we ought to have some mini festivals, some Polish festivals with the Ceausescu Park, and get people down from Chicago and from Cleveland and from Cincinnati, where there's large Polish communities. And, I mean, we're going to need parking for anything we do down there. We're going to need additional parking. And if we really upgrade this thing, the way you guys have very courageously have done so, and yes, there's been some negative, you know, there's always a few very negative people that are fighting progress or visionary planning, but I think for us to have this really super experience for all our people, this really neat place to go, and to have great days, we're probably going to have to implement additional parking, because people are going to come down there and they're going to want to park. So
That's a good point. On the park itself, on the east side, there is no parking in the park at all. It's just the on-street on Riverside Drive, plus what the garages can provide that serves the other elements here. And even on the west side, there's a couple little small pocket park areas for parking, but it's going to be competing for the parking. So when the pedestrian bridge, the parks, the plazas, and if events go hand in hand with that, there's going to be significant generation for that that's going to put a whole new level of demand beyond kind of the normal retail stuff you've seen today. It'll be a dramatically different place, I think, from an activity perspective than what the businesses today have typically generated, or the library today.
Well, I think it's important to note that by doing this massive parking in this one space, we're putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we are not distributing parking throughout the district. You know, we saw all kinds of walk studies about how far people are willing to walk. This is not going to do anything for any businesses south of 161 largely. This garage will serve primarily those north of 161, and so we'll still have a significant problem for all of the retail businesses south of the city largely, because this is a bit outside of the walking zone. I think it's also important to remember that if we combine the Darby lot and the library lot today, we're looking at 200 spots roughly, and we would have 400 spots. So we would have double what we have available right now in the evening hours. I realize during the operating hours, and I think this was written into the agreement, that after hours, the 200 spots allocated to the library would be available to the citizenry at large. So it is a huge increase. It's a 100% increase of what's available today. And, you know, with respect to what we lease from the schools, I can't imagine that lease would go away short of redevelopment of the school site, in which case I'm assuming whatever development would happen there would be significant parking added for that development there. So I would hope that that would be a net gain and not a net loss. But, you know, we're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, and we're really serving a very, we're not distributing the parking and the opportunities throughout the district. We're honed in on, you know, 4 or 5 blocks.
You know, Chris, I sort of see that, though, as the parking lot that's sort of at the key of the entry to the bridge that we're going to build, the pedestrian bridge. And if you're going to go across the river for dinner and you want to walk across there and you don't want to park on the other side, you can park there. And then to your point about south of 161, you know, we did a survey and we tried to get the different builders or developers and landowners of, you know, Blacksmith Alley and that whole area to sign up and participate in a program which we were going to pay for and utilize their parking at night, and they utilize it in the day. And I still am not giving up on that. I still think in the future, that area you just described where people may not walk from this parking garage across the street to go there, I still think there's hope to seeing all that develop in the future. I'm not giving up on that yet. I think it's for the benefit of those businesses, too, that land behind their businesses be reclaimed and organized and landscaped and lit correctly and asphalted, and I think that's where we can pick up a lot of additional parking on that side.
Well, I think that same survey was extended to those north of 161, too. I don't know that, you know, it was exclusive to the south, but I hear you, and I don't want to give up that opportunity either. I just, I'd like to keep some powder dry so that we had some resources available to capitalize on some parking opportunities and what we might need to do to service the south side as well.
Yeah. Chris, excuse me, I respectfully disagree with respect to this parking garage serving south of 161. You know, I'm a frequent visitor to the Short North, and you know, I think that disproves, you know, your theory, you know, with respect how regarding how far people will walk. I mean, you know, the parking garages down there, people walk. If you measured the distance in feet, they walk farther than this parking garage by the library to some establishment like the Dublin Village Tavern, for example. It is not that far. You know, and I think a lot of people understanding that, you know, now they're searching for a space, and you don't know where that space is. You have a parking garage with 550 spaces. I mean, they know where that space is. And, you know, are they going to drive around south of 161 hoping for that space to become available? Or are they going to drive to a parking garage where there's a greater assurance of a space, you know, being available and be willing to walk? There'll be some people that maybe won't be willing to walk, but you know, I really think the mindset's going to change. well, anyway, enough said. I appreciate your view.
Thank you. I think respectful disagreement is democracy, so I welcome that.
Bam, there you go. Any other comments or questions? Christina?
Yes, thank you. I've been waiting patiently. In the $16,000 of cost savings per space lost in option 4, well, with any of the options, actually, is that both hard cost and soft cost rolled into those numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so that's an all-inclusive number?
Yep.
Okay,
I've got it broken down both ways if you like each piece of it, but yes.
okay. So I guess, my struggle is, the height aside, you know, with the code waivers that council passed for the library, I think the one waiver I was really okay with was the height. So I guess I'm okay with that. I think this is a pretty imposing looking structure compared to its surroundings. I guess from a fiscal perspective, when I look at the amount of money that could be saved, which actually would end up bringing us under budget, which, you know, I sort of look at our projections, not as promises, but as, hey, we promise we're going to try to meet this. I feel like we're constantly, you know, inching over those numbers with most of the stuff that we do. So I guess that's where my consternation is really from a fiscal perspective. As I think about, you know, what my tax dollars go and pay for, and my mom and my in-laws, and how would they feel about an opportunity to save that money that we maybe wouldn't otherwise, and then could we take that money and do some other type of parking? I don't know, so that's where my struggle is. You know, design aside and height aside, and I understand what you're saying, you know, if we can build those extra 149 spaces for a very efficient amount of money, is that worthwhile? So that's what I'm trying to balance, and that's the struggle for me.
Sure.
And the promise of potential development, yeah, maybe it's there, but maybe it's not, right? So that's what I'm trying to balance, and that's the struggle for me. And I think this is a good conversation, and so I really appreciate it. But I just wanted to hear some
No,
reactions
I
to
think
that.
and that's the challenge with capital planning. When we put a number in the capital improvement plan and program it, before it's even a concept at some point, the biggest challenge we have working with Megan and others on this is what's the basis for a number. Certain kind of roads, we can do some guesses on them. What you're getting tonight is a number based on schematic design, which is really the first real meaningful number on this. But at the end of the day, your starting number was actually pretty good, and for the number of spaces you wanted, pretty close on there. It's a 2-year-old number. We didn't adjust it kind of last year's going up. So really, the decision you're making now is the opportunity for enough extra capacity at a pretty good increment, given the challenges of probably finding additional parking structure sites in and around that area. And the flexibility it gives you for worth it or not. If it's a design to number and say, buy me as much as 11 million gets me, and we'll take that on there, that's one you can do. I think that foregoes some opportunities on there, but that's certainly a legitimate public policy decision to make. And we've given you kind of the administrative recommendation, and now council has to make the call.
And wouldn't that be option number 5, Terry, to just build what you have designed now? Because we have 4 options, and every option has a change.
Those were value engineering options that we explored. Our recommendation is you not take any of those and you build it as proposed, which is the 549 space garage. And so you see the recommendation at the end, that's our recommendation.
So I'm sorry, why was the terracotta piece put in? I think you mentioned it earlier, but I was,
Because the piece that we have shown you and is advanced through basic plan had the metal fin on it. A council member or two has raised an issue. I'd like to see some options on that. Terracotta is the best option that we've come up with to share with you this evening. But we also had them say, give us the detailed cost estimate on that. Because now that we're getting to schematic and we're going to be telling our designers and Turner and all of our owner reps, this is your design to budget. This is what you're going to be planning to. We want that to be as carefully considered at this point as it can be.
Nothing else? Everybody talked out? All right. I'll go ahead and make the motion that staff is requesting that we make a motion that we approve the staff recommendations for the 549 parking spot garage, which requires the additional investment by the city as currently programmed.
I'll second it.
All right, Ms. Salee,
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider,
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Gromes,
No.
Vice Mayor Reiner,
Yes.
Ms. Aludo,
No.
Mr. Keenan. Yes. And Mayor Peterson.
Yes. Historic parking garage architecture. Vince.
Thank you. Good evening. Before Miguel Gonzalez comes up to walk through the design options, what we're sharing tonight are two alternatives for the exterior of the garage. Looking for a motion, if possible, from council or some direction in terms of which of those two options you'd like us to pursue further into detailed design, or if there are other comments you want us to react to. Tonight is not a zoning action. That'll come in August when the final development plan comes back to you. So what we're looking for tonight is just direction in terms of the design process and taking this further. So with that, I'll turn it over to Miguel.
Good evening. We wanted to update you on what we've been studying since last time we were here. We were asked to further look at the terracotta option last time, and we've been studying that and applying it to the entire building. So we wanted to share with you some of these images. Here's the northwest corner, kind of from the intersection of North High Street and Rockcrest. We developed further the pattern that we showed you last time, which is, let me show you some better images here. Kind of a random pattern. This is a baguette, so it's actually a 2 by 2 inch or a 4 by 2 inch piece of terracotta, about 5.5 feet long, that we're applying between vertical members, supports, and it creates this pattern, excuse me. We're also doing a slight variation in color to be in tune with the finishes used in the library. So we have kind of a white to gray color palette, with the whiter being more predominant to correspond with the color of the library. Whereas with the fin design, we're really relating more with the material. This is more about the color. The terracotta gives you a warmer material. It's slightly textured, but fairly smooth. And we think, in some ways, that actually starts to recall, some of this dry-laid stone element that you see throughout as well. So there's that kind of visual relationship. The facade along the east side, facing the garage, facing the library, sorry, starts to kind of stretch out further than the rest of the pattern. So we have kind of 3 bays of a repeating pattern to 2 bays to a single bay, and then that wraps around the corner. All elements besides that remain fairly similar, except for the stair towers. We pared down the amount of stone that we're using and treat it more as a base element where it's close to the ground, it's more visible, it's more tactile, so to speak. We've also been studying, several options of color. So this was a previous study we did. You can see it's a little more varied. We thought that these previous images really correspond more to the feel and the finish of the library, and it's a little more copacetic with that. The southwest corner, I don't know if this is something we had showed you last time, but we tried to open up that southwest stair by creating an opening that faces east. We'll see a little better here as we get further down through the elevations. This is the north side facing the park. That's Memorial. Another thing that we did was to kind of clean up the lines of the edges of how the terracotta meets the green screen so that we have a more consistent base throughout the garage. We also studied created some night renderings to really try to study the impact, the lighting of the garage itself would have on the surrounding environment, the plaza and so on. So this is an idea of how that may affect at night. From North Street, and then from Rockcrest. This is just an example to show you kind of a closer view of what the terracotta could look like, the pattern, the kind of feel. This is a building at University of Arkansas. It's the Garland Center. And they use this terracotta screen as a sort of shading device in front of a curtain wall system. And these would be the more traditional colors you would expect to see with terracotta. We've worked very closely with some of the manufacturers to really make sure that we can hit, the right colors that we want for this site.
So that color is not at all what we'll see?
No, it's really more represented by
Gray
the images that you see.
and
on the-
white and,
Exactly.
gotcha.
Which are going to relate a lot better to what the library is doing visually. So here's the east elevation facing the library, south. Oops, sorry. West, and here's that opening I referred to earlier, the stair. And north. And quickly wanted to recap the fin design, since we probably haven't really looked at this for a while. So again, going through the same views, the view from the plaza, the library plaza. We've been studying the pattern a little more specifically as well of the fins. Trying to show what it may look like in the future once we have, trees that are grown and so on. And the north side with the bike hub. And again, we tried to do the same sort of light studies for this option as well. From the north side. And this is actually, we're looking at a slight variation of the fin design that we had seen previously, not only in the pattern, but also the spacing. They're a little wider spacing than what we had seen before, about 16 inches on center. And again, an example of an application that's quite similar with these twisting fins. So you could get a little bit of a close-up look at what that may feel like, that texture. This is a much taller building, obviously, but it gives you the idea. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from council?
I have a couple. I'm looking at some of the, well, with both options, the stairs just are so large and so dominating, particularly that southeast, northeast corner. It kind of just takes away from the design. I don't know, it's just so dominant. I'm curious if it has to, they have to be that big because of, or are we trying to?
The stair height is actually a direct function of the elevator overrun above that last floor, so it's kind of that's the absolute minimum height that we
It
can have
has
for
to
the
be
elevator.
like that, okay.
And we made the decision, because we have 2 elevators, 3 stairs, we made the decision to keep the stairs the same, as opposed to having varying heights, which was a little, seemed a little messy, I guess, visually. But it's really driven by the elevator height.
Okay. My second question relates to lighting in parking garages, because nothing ruins a good-looking parking garage so much as the light fixtures at night that are blaring out. And I'm wondering which of these 2 materials do you think hide that and enable us to have a better look? Because I'm looking at the nighttime renderings, and I think both of them are interesting and attractive. But then when I think about seeing that, those lighting fixtures, it kind of takes away from it.
I believe that the terracotta option would give you much better filtering of the light, simply because it's a smaller element that can be spaced closer together. So it's going to act a little more as a filter than the fins, which are spaced much wider apart. So there's going to be a little more screening of the lighting.
And is it possible to do our fixtures such that they don't, come out so much? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking about the one
C4
garage.
Well,
Yeah.
the issue with that garage was that the fixtures were actually mounted incorrectly. So they were actually mounted below the beams, which is why there was so much spill out. So they're really meant to be above the plane of the bottom of the beam, which really captures a lot of that light within that, so there's not as much spill out. So that's the intent here as well. And I believe that's been corrected on C4. Yeah.
So for the metal fins, they're designed to be white? Is that going to be like a lot of white?
The fin color, we're still tweaking. So I think the fin color has a little more possibility to go in the more gray. So it's a little more neutral, because the white could be a little, because it is metal.
Yeah.
Now, we're looking at finishes that are not necessarily, reflective, highly reflective and shiny.
More of a matte type
But
of
we are
a...
thinking of a more muted color for that.
And so how is that, is it some type of a paint that's applied to the
Yes.
metal fin?
Be a
And so
powder
what's the
coat.
maintenance on that like? Like, will it chip over time?
Typically, these have a, it depends on the manufacturer, but they do have a warranty for a specified number of years, and after that, they may need, maintenance periodically.
And the same question kind of for the terracotta, is that a paint that's on the?
The terracotta is just like a brick.
That's-
It's an
I get-
integral color.
okay.
It wouldn't
So it's
fade.
baked in,
It's
so-
baked in, exactly. Yeah.
I see.
Any other comments?
I prefer the terracotta. I like the big surprise, right?